Chapter 323. Under Edwin Van Cleef's arrangement, Zhang Qing was given a simple house in the death mines. Even though it was just a wooden house built with dry stencils, it was enough for him, whose body was constantly being corroded by evil. Without any hesitation, he used less than an afternoon to concoct 30 bottles of beginner healing potion, proving his worth to the Defias Brotherhood. It should be noted that those who mastered alchemy had always been the important reserve talents of various countries and forces. They were not bandits or warriors who could be casually sacrificed as consumables. Therefore, the suspicion of spies had mostly disappeared. What was left was the routine of sending people to keep an eye on them for a few months. But Zhang Qing obviously did not care about the 2 masked men outside the house 24 hours a day. His mind was full of thoughts on how to control the spreading demonization. He devoted himself to learning and studying dark energy and shadow energy, absorbing and digesting all knowledge and power related to the warlocks. Under his crazy and cruel torture, Akrel finally revealed the truth. It turned out that the dark energy that had invaded his body was not just dark energy, but also an incomplete demon soul. Although the demon soul was still in a deep sleep due to its severe injuries, it was still enough to cause a terrible impact on a mortal's body. The Orc Warlock's initial goal was to first transform Zhang Qing into a demon, and then use the demon enslavement technique to make him his servant. But what he didn't expect was that Zhang Qing wasn't the kind of young mage who was inexperienced in magic. When he noticed that something was wrong, he decisively abandoned some magic circuits and quickly built the magic circuits needed by warlocks to cast spells. The moment he left the seal, he directly extracted his soul. "I see. There's a demon soul living in my body." Zhang Qing, who knew the truth, narrowed his eyes and whispered. Obviously, there were 2 choices in front of him. One was to completely give up the warlock's power that he had gained at the cost of fire spells and extract the dark energy and the demon soul from his body. The advantage of this was that there was no danger, and as the dark energy and the demon soul left his body, his mutated body would return to normal. But the disadvantage was that he could only cast frost and arcane spells in the future. As for the other option, it was nothing more than retaining the power of a warlock and forming a symbiotic relationship with the demon's soul. In this way, not only could he obtain strength far beyond that of an ordinary warlock, but he could also use fire spells with evil energy to make up for his losses. Most importantly, a demon's soul was a natural source of constant energy. Although it could only provide 2 types of energy, dark energy and shadow energy, it was still a good trump card. The only problem that needed to be solved was that the sleeping demon's soul would wake up one day. At that time, it would definitely think of ways to tempt him into depravity, or even secretly think of ways to seize control of the body. In addition, the demonization of the body was also a troublesome matter. At most, it could only be limited to a certain part of the body, and there was no way to completely eradicate it. Just as Zhang Qing was frowning and weighing the pros and cons, a petite figure suddenly appeared near the window. Half of her head popped out, and her eyes were wide open as she stared into the room. Her eyes were filled with curiosity and fear. "Vanessa, is that you?" Zhang Qing asked without turning his head. As an idler who had lived in the death mines for 2 weeks, it was naturally impossible for him not to recognize the famous daughter of Edwin Van Cleef. In fact, this little girl was in a semi-free state most of the time. As long as she did not go near the surface exit, she could go anywhere she wanted. From time to time, she would even learn some stealth, sneak attacks, and poison-making skills from the bandits of the Brotherhood. But ever since Zhang Qing came, the girl's attention was firmly attracted to him, especially the wonderful alchemy and magic, which deeply fascinated her. Dad asked me to inform you to remember to attend the meeting on the ship after lunch." Vanessa nodded her little head lightly. "Oh, I got it." Zhang Qing agreed without hesitation. As one of the few spellcasters and alchemists in the Phidia Brotherhood, perhaps he had only joined for a short time, but he had also obtained the right to participate in decision-making meetings. It was just that he did not express any opinions most of the time. "What are you doing?" Vanessa did not leave after receiving the reply. Instead, she climbed in through the window and asked with a face full of curiosity. Looking at this quick-witted little girl, Zhang Qing could not help but shake his head with a smile. "No, nothing. I'm making a difficult choice. By the way, are you not afraid of my looks anymore?" One had to know that when he first met Vanessa, she was so frightened by his half-demon appearance that she burst into tears. Who would have thought that within a few days, a very subtle connection would form between the two of them? "Humph. I'm not afraid." The girl raised her chin proudly. "Hee, alright. You're not afraid. You're crying because you're touched by my handsome appearance, right?" Zhang Qing pursed his lips and teased. "Bah! You're so shameless. As expected of a warlock who deals with demons." Vanessa made a face mischievously. After a few days of interaction, she gradually understood that this frightening-looking young uncle in front of her was actually not as scary as she had imagined. Instead, he was a very humorous and witty person, and had many interesting things in his hands. "Ha ha ha ha. Thank you for the compliment, Miss Van Cleef. If you don't mind, could you please leave us for a moment? I'm going to do a more dangerous experiment, and I don't want you to get hurt." Having said that, Zhang Qing handed her a bottle of silver-white potion from the shelf. No problem. Don't forget to go to the meeting." Vanessa jumped up and snatched the bottle of potion, disappearing into the dark depths of the mine. Looking at her carefree figure, Zhang Qing sighed softly, and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. "What a pitiful girl. Enjoy your happiness while you still can. It won't be long before everything you have is gone, and you'll be devoured by the monster called hatred." Sighing was one thing, but he had no intention of interfering with the fate of the Van Cleef father and daughter. After resting for a while and having a rather sumptuous lunch, he quickly began to draw complicated patterns on the empty living room floor of the wooden house. This time, he was not drawing arcane runes, but demonic runes that emitted a strong evil aura. It was obvious that Zhang Qing wanted to try summoning a demon, and whether he could succeed would depend on his luck. After all, summoning a demon in reality was not like in a game, where one only needed to complete a series of missions and pay a soul shard. Chapter 324. There was no doubt that drawing a summoning circle was not an easy task. Normally, warlocks would need to spend at least 1.5 hours to complete the carving of demonic runes and activate them with fresh blood. However, to ensure safety, especially the part in the center of the circle that was used to bind the demons, it had to be checked multiple times to ensure that there were no mistakes. This process would usually last for more than 3 days. Those who were cautious would even use a week to half a month to repeatedly check until they could not find a single flaw. If one wanted to use it for a long time, they would have to go through a series of magical reinforcement. In short, the strictness of the summoning circle determined the life and death of the warlock. Therefore, no warlock dared to be careless because those who were careless were usually killed by the demons during the first ritual. Fortunately, Zhang Qing had a great cheat, and that was the demonized half of his body. With the help of the abnormal state of this half of his body, he did not need to check if there were any mistakes in the combination of runes one by one. He only needed to extend his arm to feel the resistance, and he could easily determine if the binding part of the demonic runes was working. In less than 2 hours, he had completed a passage that connected to the distorted void in the living room of the wooden house. Accompanied by the foul demonic language, the runes around the summoning circle began to emit a dark green glow. Then, the center began to emit terrifying flames of evil energy. Through the burning flames, Zhang Qing could vaguely see an ugly, distorted face that emitted powerful evil energy. Just as he was about to get closer for a closer look, A thick claw forcefully tore through the space and allowed a huge upper body to squeeze through the passage. A head that was burning with evil energy flames, a mouth full of sharp teeth, a shield made of unknown metal hanging from its abdomen, and a bunch of uncoordinated wings on its back. Through the gaps in the passage, he could vaguely see that the upper body of this demon was similar to a human, but the lower body was like a reptile, like a dragon man. Not only did it have a tail full of bone spikes, but it also had 4 restless hooves. Without a doubt, this was a Lord of the Abyss, a high-ranking commander of the Burning Legion. At the same time, it was also a synonym for violent, cruel, and murderous. But what puzzled Zhang Qing was that he had clearly just opened the channel and had not yet had the time to throw in the soul fragments to attract the demon. So why was the other party so eager to respond to the summon? One had to pay a price to summon demons, and this price was the soul fragments extracted from living beings. The more fragments and the higher the quality, the easier it was to attract the attention of high-level demons. In fact, all the demons that could be controlled and enslaved by warlocks, be it the imp, the voidwalker, the hellhound, the succubus, the hellfire, or the doomguard, were all at the bottom of the army. The true high-level demons would not allow mortals to control their will. Simply put, the Dreadlord, Erida, and the Abyssal Lord were the masters of the source of power for warlocks. Warlocks could summon and enslave the legions under them. The Abyssal Lord first widened his eyes to observe the surroundings before roaring in a low and hoarse voice, "Lowly ants! Tell the great Carter Kaz, what do you want? Power? Money? Or power?" "No, I don't want anything. I just want to ask a few questions." Zhang Qing lowered his head and stared at the binding runes in the summoning circle that could collapse at any time. As long as one of these runes was destroyed, he would definitely turn and flee. As for whether the Death Mines and the Western Wastelands would be occupied by demons, that was none of his business. After all, the Abyssal Lord was a terrifying monster that could destroy an entire city alone. With his current strength, let alone fight back, he might even be devoured by the boundless evil flames on the spot. Questions? The Abyssal Lord, who called himself Carter Kaz, showed a trace of doubt on his ferocious face. Obviously, in his memory, most warlocks summon demons for nothing more than power, money, and power. This was the first time he had heard of one asking questions. Yes, questions. I want to know how to stop a sleeping demon's soul from invading my body. Zhang Qing nodded without hesitation and then gently took off his hood, revealing his half-demon body. Seeing this scene, Carter Kaz's eyes instantly burst with a mixture of surprise, playfulness, and joy. Soon, he laughed out loud. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. This is too interesting. No wonder Marasa didn't return to the distorted space to wait for his resurrection. So his soul is in your body. Marasa? You know the demon's soul sleeping in my body? Zhang Cheng's face suddenly turned a little ugly. That's right. Marasa is a Erida demon, a powerful spellcaster and a cunning master tactician. During the war with the orcs, he was once summoned to the battlefield and unfortunately killed. It seems that the Shadow Council secretly imprisoned his soul. Mortal, your body is undergoing some interesting changes. If you can take this opportunity to devour Malasa's soul and knowledge, you can replace it and become an indispensable member of the army. Katgaz's mouth cracked into a sinister smile. Although the Burning Legion had been integrated by Kill, Jaden, and the Arkharans, ending the originally chaotic way of management, there was still plenty of scheming in the dark. There were endless cases of people trying to harm each other. It was obvious that this Abyssal Lord and the Erida demon called Marasa had a secret grudge, so it wasn't surprising that he wanted to get rid of him. Devour Marasa's knowledge and soul? Then will I become an Erida demon? Zhang Qing asked with furrowed brows. It's hard to say. Maybe you'll become an Erida, or maybe a brand new demon will be born. Who knows? How about it? Are you interested in signing a contract with me? I can help you at a crucial time, but the price is that you have to become my subordinate, Carter Kaz suggested with ill intentions. Zhang Qing hesitated for a moment with a gloomy expression, but he quickly shook his head. No. Thank you for your good intentions. I still have a mission to complete, and I don't want to become a demon for the time being. However, I can make a deal with you. I'll use a precious soul fragment in exchange for the method to suppress the demonization of my body. What do you think? Having said that, he took out the crystal that imprisoned Okari's soul from his pocket. Chapter 325. Oh? The soul of a beastman warlock? As a lord of the abyss, Cartagaz could recognize the essence and value of the soul fragment with just a glance. An expression of interest appeared on his sinister and ugly face. After Sar led the beastmen and Taurans to victory in the holy war at Mount Hyjal, he wantonly promoted shamanism among his compatriots to replace and suppress the influence of the warlock. Now, except for a few small groups, most of the beastmen had given up on obtaining power from the demons, so the number of warlocks was decreasing. Apart from the Blackrock clan that was loyal to the Black Dragon King, Nefarian, and the Dragonroar clan that wandered around the wetlands, there were very few beastman warlocks. On the contrary, there were more forgotten warlocks whose hearts were distorted by hatred, as well as human warlocks with complex personalities. No, this is not an ordinary beastman warlock. His name is Okair, and he was once a member of the Shadow Council. And if I'm not wrong, he was the one who imprisoned Marasa's soul. After saying that, Zhang Qing gently tossed the soul fragment in his hand into the air. The crystal that flickered with a faint purple light drew a beautiful parabola and landed right in the palm of the Lord of the Abyss. Feeling the struggling and roaring soul in the fragment, Cartagaz opened his mouth and laughed without restraint. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Too interesting. I like this little toy. Here, this is a book of control. Not only does it record the knowledge you desire, it also has the power to suppress Hellfire and Doomsday Guard. In addition, I'll give you a bottle of my blood. If Marasa's soul awakens one day, you'll need it. As soon as he finished speaking, the Lord of the Abyss threw a book that emitted a strong evil aura on the ground, then cut his finger and squeezed out a drop of crazy blood into a flask not far away. Of course, this drop was calculated based on his huge body, and not the size of a human. Just as Zhang Cheng's attention was attracted by the Book of Control, the runes on Cartagaz's summoning array that connected the two worlds suddenly shattered without warning. To be precise, it could no longer withstand the pressure of the Abyssal Lord's dragon-like body and was on the brink of collapse. In just a few seconds, the passageway had become unusually unstable. Katgaz also seemed to be very clear that this temporary summoning circle would not allow him to enter Azeroth. Without thinking, he retreated and gradually disappeared into the raging flames of evil fire. Less than half a minute after it disappeared, the green evil fire suddenly exploded violently and engulfed the entire wooden house in the blink of an eye. But what was strange was that even though the room was quickly turned into a pile of charcoal, none of the important things were burned. Whether it was the alchemy table, the tools, the notes, or the materials placed beside it, they were all intact, as if the evil flame had deliberately avoided them. If it was any other time, Zhang Qing would definitely study the secrets behind the strange phenomenon. But now, all his attention was attracted by the demon tome of control. He did not even care about the frightened expressions of the two Brotherhood members outside the house. He quickly flipped through the pages and found the technique to suppress the demon's soul in the last few pages. The method was very simple. It was to completely demonize a certain part of the body, then use the power of the demonic runes to imprison the soul. In fact, many sorcerers used this technique to maximize their power. When necessary, they could even completely release the demon's soul, allowing themselves to transform into a powerful demon for a short period of time. Now, what Zhang Qing needed to do was to choose a part of his body from the hands, eyes, and feet of the left side of his body as a cage for Melissa's sleeping soul. If it was the hands, then he would obtain claws that could tear through steel. If it was the feet, he would obtain the terrifying speed and explosive power of a demon. If it was the eyes, he would obtain the ability to look directly into the soul. After much consideration, Zhang Qing decided to use the eyes as a cage. On one hand, although the power of looking directly into the soul could not directly increase his combat power, it would be a great help for future research on the soul. On the other hand, the eyes were the easiest part to cover. After returning to Earth, he only needed a pair of sunglasses or contact lenses to cover up his eyes. And no matter how he concealed the demon's hands and feet, it was very easy to detect that something was wrong. Obviously, compared to getting rid of all the hidden dangers once and for all, he resolutely chose to preserve the power of the sorcerer and the demon in his body. Because in his eyes there was no great power in the world that could be obtained without taking risk. The greater the power, the higher the price to pay. If he succeeded, he could surpass himself, but if he failed, he would be sent to hell. This intense stimulation of walking the line between life and death didn't make Zhang Qing feel afraid. Instead, it made him feel an indescribable sense of excitement and anticipation. It was as if a gambler was using his own life as a chip to start an unprecedented gamble. Sometimes, he even wondered if there was something wrong with his mind, or if he was a pervert. Otherwise, why would a normal person still choose to embark on a dangerous journey when they knew it was dangerous, instead of finding a safe corner to hide in? But such doubts were quickly thrown to the back of his mind, and he focused on the process of making the seal. With the help of a small piece of mirror that was not very clear, Zhang Qing used a knife to carve bloody symbols around his eyelids. Then, he used the blood of the Lord of the Abyss's madness to activate the runes. When the area around his eyes was completely dyed red with blood, he began to mobilize the shadow and evil energy in his body to his left eye. In less than a minute, the originally dark green pupil began to shrink, shrink, and expand. During the whole process, the shadow of a demon of Erida gradually appeared in his pupil. After about 10 minutes, the shadow gradually disappeared, and the evil energy that burst out from his eye from time to time also slowly calmed down. Instead, it was replaced by an intoxicating evil aura. It seemed that if one looked into it, one would fall into an irresistible fanaticism and worship. So this is the demon's eye. Enduring the intense pain from his left eye, Zhang Qing slightly raised the corner of his mouth, revealing a chilling smile. He could feel that the moment the seal was completed, he had regained control of his body. Especially the demonic half of his body, which was rapidly returning to normal. But this did not mean that his power had weakened. On the contrary, as long as he was willing, he could release the cage at any time and extract power from Marasa's sleeping soul, gaining unimaginable and terrifying spellcasting ability in a short time. Chapter 326. Afternoon, Edwin Van Cleef sat in front of a table in the cabin of a battleship that was about to be completed in the deepest part of the Death Mines, patiently waiting for the arrival of the higher-ups of the Brotherhood. Due to the active actions of Stormwind City's MI7, many important members were locked up in prison, including a right-hand man like Bale Siridley. Most of the people left in the Death Mines were hired thugs and technicians. For example, the stupid ogre Raxo, the logging machine driving expert Stheens, and the goblin craftsman Kilnig, who was in charge of creating weapons and ammunition. There were also the Tauren Mr. Heavy Fist, Murloc Cookie, and the green-skinned goblin captain who was proficient in navigation and cannon control. Even though these people were much better than most of the Brotherhood members in terms of combat power and professional skills, their loyalty was very questionable. This was especially true for the goblins who were greedy for money. They would definitely not die with the Brotherhood. Once they realized that the situation was not good, they would definitely turn and run. To ensure that the just revenge in his heart could be realized, Edwin Van Cleef had no choice but to gather these people together once in a while. On one hand, he would listen to their suggestions and requests, and on the other hand, he would confirm that they had not betrayed him. Time ticked by slowly. Soon, Mr. Heavy Fist, who had a straightforward personality and loved to fight, arrived. He was followed by the 3 gnome leaders, Sterny, Kearney, and the Green Dwarf captain. The last one to arrive was naturally the ogre Raxo. As for Murloc Cookie, he did not have the right to participate in such a meeting for the time being. He only cared about patrolling the bottom of the ship to prevent spies from diving into the mines to scout for information. Edwin Van Cleef glanced at the various expressions on everyone's faces and coughed intentionally. He said in a low voice, "Since everyone is here, I announce the start of the meeting." As soon as he finished speaking, the goblin craftsman Kilnig immediately questioned, "Everyone's here? That can't be right. Wasn't there a warlock? Where did he go?" "Yes. Where's the young man called Mason?" Steens echoed. It was obvious that the Mason they were talking about was none other than Zhang Qing, who had just joined not long ago. However, he did not use his real name. Instead, he chose to use the fake name he used in the Song of Ice and Fire world, Mason. After all, he was only using this place as a temporary shelter. It would not be worth it if he was accidentally blacklisted by the MI7. Damn it. Vanessa, have you informed Mason? Edwin Van Cleef rubbed his forehead and yelled for his only daughter. Bang. Accompanied by a puff of choking white smoke, a girl with short black hair suddenly appeared in the cabin. With a serious face, she replied, "Yes, of course. He said he would come after lunch." Cough, cough, cough. Heavens! What strange thing are you playing with now? Edwin Van Cleef covered his nose and coughed violently. In fact, it wasn't just him. Other than the slow ogre Raxo, everyone else held their breaths to prevent the strange smoke from entering their bodies. Strange? No, father, this is the new toy Mason gave me. I only need 1 or 2 drops of it to make me transparent. Vanessa held up the silver flask in her hand. It can make people transparent? Edwin Van Cleef subconsciously snatched the bottle and carefully pulled out the stopper to drip a drop onto his hand. In an instant, his hand began to gradually become transparent and illusory. In the end, it completely disappeared without a trace. Following that, it slowly spread to his arms, body, and even the leather armor on his body was no exception. Even Mr. Heavy Fist, who had always been careless, couldn't help but stand up when faced with such a strange change, let alone him. However, as the person involved, Edwin Van Cleef could feel that his body didn't really disappear. Instead, it produced a strange light, just like the skin of a chameleon, completely blending into the surrounding environment. As a bandit, he was too clear about the wide range of uses behind this bottle of potion. Whether it was assassination or infiltration to spy on intelligence, it was a rare help. One had to know that reality wasn't a game. Players only needed to click on the stealth skill and could swagger into any place they wanted to under the sun. In fact, the so-called stealth was only using light, shadows, and the surrounding environment to achieve the purpose of concealing oneself. If there were no shadows or any cover around, even if Master Matthias Shaw came, he wouldn't be able to achieve stealth. He would be 100% discovered by the guard. Just when Edwin Van Cleef was greatly interested in the unknown potion, a series of light footsteps suddenly came from outside the cabin. After about half a minute, a familiar voice echoed in everyone's ears. "Sorry, there's a small accident. I seem to be late." After saying that, Zhang Qing, who was wearing the blue robe of a great mage, walked in from outside the door unhurriedly. For some reason, his appearance was like a black hole, firmly attracting the attention of everyone present, especially the deep and evil left eye. It was constantly emitting an invisible aura, making the heart beat faster. The desire in the subconscious increased by more than a few times. Edwin Van Cleef, who had always been unusually sensitive to danger, hurriedly took 2 steps back and asked vigilantly, "What's wrong with your eye?" Nothing. I've just learned some skills, and I can control the demonic power in my body." In addition, I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't stare at me, or else. Before Zhang Qing could finish his words, the tall ogre suddenly knelt down with a plop and shouted in a fanatical tone, "Great master! Your servant, Raxo, is at your command." "Raxo? What are you doing?" Edwin Van Cleef yelled in shock. "Don't be nervous. He was just tempted by the demon's eye," Zhang Qing explained as he took the initiative to close his left eye. When the bloody runes around the eye socket began to glow, the omnipresent evil instantly disappeared without a trace. The ogre lay on the ground for a long time with a dumbfounded expression before finally regaining consciousness and returning to his seat. At this moment, Zhang Qing realized why the Burning Legion chose the low-intelligence ogres and orcs as cannon fodder. These brainless fellows were too easy to tempt and control. It was no wonder that the orcs looked one way during Thrall's reign, and quickly changed to another when it was Garrosh Hellscream. Chapter 327. You're getting scarier, Mason. Edwin Van Cleef narrowed his eyes and sighed meaningfully. With just a look, he could make the powerful ogre submit to him. This was not a power that a mortal should have. He had long heard that warlocks who dealt with demons for a long time had all sorts of incredible abilities. Some could even summon demons and use evil flames and shadow spells to fight. It was because of this that he chose to take Mason in. But who would have thought that in just a few days, the situation would develop beyond his expectations? Sensing the intense fear in the eyes of the Brotherhood's leader, Zhang Qing smiled and bowed with one hand on his chest. It seems that it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for taking me in recently. In return, I've specially concocted 100 beginner healing potions and 30 disguise potions for Vanessa. Don't worry, I won't betray the Brotherhood, and I won't reveal your plans. You're leaving? Edwin Van Cleef stroked the beard on his chin thoughtfully. That's right. After all, my existence has already made you nervous. If I don't leave now, it will definitely cause a series of problems. What do you think? Zhang Qing asked calmly. In fact, after sealing Melassa's soul, there were not many characteristics of a demon on the surface. He could leave this place and go to the Stormwind City Mage District, the Lamb Slaughtered Inn, to receive a series of professional warlock training. Although his mind was now filled with all sorts of knowledge, and at the same time mastered a large number of powerful curses and magic techniques, he still seriously lacked the foundation. He could not even control the power of the shadow arrow. Every time he released it, it was to the maximum. Edwin Van Cleef hesitated for a moment before finally nodding reluctantly. All right, what you said makes sense. But remember, don't betray us, or the Brotherhood's assassins will visit you at any time. I promise. Since you've agreed, I'll pack up and leave. Goodbye. With that, Zhang Qing left the cabin without looking back, disappearing into the depths of the mine. Just as he left, a human thief with a red face cloth walked out from the shadows and asked in a low voice, "Leader, do you want me to follow him?" "No, there's no need for that. Just have our spy in Stormwind City, Silent Blade Marson, keep an eye on him. He is not our enemy, at least not yet." Edwin Van Cleef waved his hand. Understood. The bandit agreed without hesitation, and then disappeared into the shadows again. At the same time, Zhang Qing returned to the vicinity of the burned wooden house. He put all his belongings, as well as the precious herbs that he had stolen under the guise of making potions, into his magic pouch and left the death mines from the back of the mountain. When he breathed in the air of the western wilderness again, he let out a sigh of relief. He put on the leather blindfold and headed toward Elwyn Forest. The wild boars, vultures, and gnolls along the way did not pose much of a threat. It took him about a week to pass through the abandoned farms and enter the boundary of Elwyn Forest. Just when Zhang Qing was starting to get tired of the endless journey, he suddenly heard the sound of fighting in front of him, as well as the ear-piercing howl of a wolf. "A woo! Damn it! There are too many of them. Come to me. Light the smoke signal and wait for help." A man's impatient voice echoed in the forest. Driven by curiosity, Zhang Qing quickened his pace. After about 3 to 5 minutes, he saw a few carriages and 4 warriors wearing chainmail and holding longswords on the side of the road. Behind the warrior, there were 8 shivering coachmen and a balding merchant. The monsters that surrounded the caravan were none other than the gnolls, the most numerous and most destructive species in Elwyn Forest. One of them was more than twice as strong as a normal gnoll. He held a blood-stained axe in his hand. If he was not mistaken, he was Hogg, who had been on the top of the wanted list for a long time. Due to the huge difference in numbers, the warriors were quickly injured under the enemy's siege. Blood dyed their armor and the grass red. Old George? Zhang Qing recognized his partner at a glance, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. There was no hesitation. Realizing that the situation was critical, he immediately activated Ice Barrier and blinked into the middle of the group of gnolls. First, he used Frost Nova to freeze a large number of gnolls in place. Then, 2 arcane explosions shook them to the ground, causing them to spit out mouthfuls of blood. After a while, they breathed their last. As a level 60 elite mage who had reached the maximum level of his profession template, the power of his spells was not something that a few gnolls could withstand. After dealing with the gnolls, Zhang Qing immediately turned around and stared at the gnoll leader that he suspected to be Hogg. The latter sensed the danger and turned to run into the forest. It was not stupid enough to fight with a powerful spellcaster who was far stronger than it. Otherwise, it would not have survived the encirclement again and again. Interesting, a smart gnoll is rare. Zhang Qing pursed his lips and showed a playful smile. He raised his right index finger and shot out beautiful arcane missiles, hitting the gnoll's ankle joint fiercely. After a series of popping sounds, the gnoll leader could no longer bear the intense pain and rolled on the ground, howling in pain. When the warriors saw this, they quickly reacted. They rushed up and broke the gnoll's limbs with the hilts of their swords, then tied it up with ropes. When the dust settled, old George finally came back to his senses. He rushed out excitedly and shouted, "Holy light! You've saved me again, Mr. Mage. You are the savior of my life. Hee, long time no see. By the way, what goods are in your car that attracted the gnoll's attention?" Zhang Qing said in a half-joking tone. "Shh. It's arcane crystals and some dirt and crystals from Ungoro Crater. There is an archmage in Dalaran who is very interested in these colorful things, and offered a high price of 50 gold coins per kilogram." Old George looked around and made sure that no one was eavesdropping, then he whispered the answer in his ear. "Dirt and crystals from the crater? No wonder." Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with understanding. According to his understanding, the dirt from the crater could not only provide unimaginable vitality for plants, but the crystals also contained magical power. Chapter 328. In the evening, in the western Spring Fortress, a large number of merchants, mercenaries, and soldiers of the kingdom who were stationed here had gathered together. They were exchanging information about their travels while gulping down large mouthfuls of tasteless but very cheap ale. As the only fortress of Stormwind City that guarded the western border of Elwyn Forest, there were more than 400 professional soldiers stationed here to ensure that the chaos in the western wilderness would not spread. At the same time, they would occasionally sweep the surrounding gnolls and kobolds to prevent them from posing too much of a threat to the merchants. Of course, in addition to the regular soldiers, there were also some mercenaries and adventurers who were attracted by all kinds of reward. They used the swords in their hands to kill monsters and earn their own wealth. To some extent, West Spring Fortress was not just a fortress. It was more like a transportation hub with military functions. Although it only took a few days to reach Gold's Higher Town, people were still used to spending a night here to enjoy the security brought by the tall walls and ask about the recent happenings. At this moment, Zhang Qing was sitting in the main hall of the Shichuan Fortress, sipping a thick soup made from some unknown meat and vegetables. After about 2 or 3 minutes, old George excitedly carried a rather heavy leather bag to the side and said with a smile, "Sir Wizard, this is Hog's bounty. It's a total of 50 gold coins." 50 gold coins is so high? Zhang Qing glanced at the leather bag in surprise. It was important to know that the bounty of Hog's bounty in the game was less than 7 silver coins and a piece of low-level green equipment. But now, the bounty had increased by 100 times. It was really unexpected. 50 gold coins was not a small bounty. On the contrary, for a gnoll, this was a rather outrageous price. After all, killing an ordinary gnoll and bringing back their claws could only earn 3 to 4 silver coins. Of course it's high. You don't know, but Hog is not an ordinary gnoll. The crimes he has committed are no less than that of Edwin Van Cleef, the leader of the Fidian Brotherhood. Many civilians have nightmares at night when they hear his name. If you didn't insist on not revealing your identity, Vice Captain Reiner would have invited you for a drink to express his respect. After saying that, old George picked up the cup full of ale and drank it all in one gulp. His eyes were shining with excitement, and it was impossible to tell that he had just been attacked and almost lost his life. As a merchant, he clearly understood what it meant to capture Hog. At the same time, he also understood that if this powerful young mage was unwilling to reveal his identity, he would be the biggest beneficiary. After this incident, whether it was West Spring Fort, Gold's Higher Town, or Storm City in the north, the name of the Chamber of Commerce he led would begin to spread. His reputation would determine whether he would be noticed by the nobles who held great power and use this opportunity to climb to a higher social class. I see. Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. By the way, you don't have to give me these gold coins. Give me a portion of the ring-shaped mountain water crystals in your carriage. Crystal? Are you also interested in those little gadgets that are just pretty but useless? Old George asked with a puzzled look. Yes, I am slightly interested. As far as I know, those crystals seem to contain some kind of mysterious radiation that can make life stronger and stronger. Haven't you heard that the arcane tyrannosauruses that are as tall as ancient trees in the ring-shaped mountain range became so terrifying because of the influence of the crystals? Zhang Qing explained half-truthfully. However, the real reason was that the Pantheon Titan, the sculptor Kaz Garoth, had built a huge biological laboratory in the ring-shaped mountain range to observe the evolution and reproduction of life in Azeroth. Although the Titan had been gone for a long time, the guardian he had left behind, Nabiya, was still diligently carrying out her duties. The terrifying arcane tyrannosauruses, the powerful gorillas, the velociraptors that hunted in groups, and some other ancient species such as the Stegosaurus, the Amphisaurus, the pterosaurs, the original ooze, and so on were all evolved through thousands of years of experiment. They were more primitive and stronger than the creatures in other parts of Azeroth. Even the adult dragon aspect did not dare to provoke the majesty of the arcane Tyrannosaurus king. Old George obviously did not know this. After knowing that Zhang Qing also wanted the crystals, he did not touch the money bag. Instead, he smiled and shook his head. No, I can't take the money. You can take half of the crystals in the car as my repayment for saving my life. I need to send the other half to Dalaran. Don't refuse. Trust me, these things are just a little troublesome to transport. The purchase price is almost the same as ordinary stone. Okay, thank you. Zhang Qing did not refuse and generously accepted the other party's kindness. After all, the two of them had a long-term cooperation project like the alchemy potion, so there was no need to be calculative. There was still plenty of time in the future. Haha, you're too polite. If you don't mind, can you tell me about Jenny's recent situation? Old George changed the topic and started the conversation about his little daughter. She's doing well. Under the guidance of Mage Jabez, she has begun to learn complex magic theory and knowledge. Recently, she has been exposed to the basics of alchemy. I believe that it won't be long before she can master some beginner spells and potion refining technique. Zhang Qing quietly concealed the part where the girl was being used. Hearing about his daughter's learning progress, old George could not help but show a gratified smile. Just as he was about to say something, an injured caravan guard suddenly came to the side of the table without warning. With a plop, he knelt down on one knee and asked in an excited voice, "Sir Mage, my name is Simon, a shield-wielding warrior. I wonder if I can have the honor of becoming your follower?" "You want to become my follower?" Zhang Qing raised his eyebrows slightly in surprise. "Yes. I don't want to be trapped in a small place and live a miserable life. I want to be strong, to see a wider world. And you are the only one who can give me a chance. For this, I am willing to give my loyalty and life." The young man who called himself Simon clenched his fist and responded loudly. Because of his rash action, the hall suddenly became silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked over. It was a very common thing to follow the strong in the human kingdom, but what puzzled everyone was that Zhang Qing was only in his early 20s. No matter how they looked at him, he did not look like a strong person. At most, he was an apprentice-level mage. Of course, the caravan guards who had seen with their own eyes how he was almost invincible when he swept away the gnolls showed a natural expression, but they were not sure if a low-level warrior like Simon would be accepted. Chapter 329. Are you sure you understand the responsibilities and duties of a follower? Zhang Qing ignored the gazes of the people in the hall and asked with a faint smile. Simon hesitated for a moment. He nodded and then shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir. I only know that a follower has to obey his master's orders and fight for his master. I'm not sure about the rest, but I promise I'll do it without hesitation no matter what it is." "Even if it's to kill civilians?" Zhang Qing stared at the young man's determined eyes and asked meaningfully. "As long as it's your order." Simon took a deep breath and answered quickly. His attitude was so resolute that he seemed to realize that if he hesitated even a little, he would lose the chance to change his fate. "Very good. From today onwards, you're my follower. Remember the promise you made today. Never disobey any of my orders. Otherwise, you'll receive a punishment worse than death." Zhang Qing turned around and smiled at old George apologetically. "I'm sorry, old friend. I'm afraid you'll have to hire another guard." "Ha ha ha ha. It's okay. Simon is a good young man. It's his luck to be your follower. As for manpower, you don't have to worry about it. When we reach Storm City, I'll take the ship directly to South Shore. I don't need any guards at all." Old George laughed happily. There was no trace of anger at being poached. No matter what, he was still a merchant. He could not gain the loyalty of others like nobles. The so-called guards were mostly hired and changed frequently. There was no need to worry about such a small matter. "Storm City has a dock? How come I've never heard of it?" Zhang Qing was surprised. According to his memory, Storm City's dock was only built after the expedition to Nordsen. It was just a busy construction site. No merchant ships were allowed to dock there. There is a dock, but normal people can't use it. I happen to be very familiar with the port official, so he will open the door at night and let me move the goods up," old George explained in a low voice, rather proud of himself. "You didn't bribe this official with money, did you?" Zhang Qing, who knew the inside story, teased in a half-joking tone. As the saying went, as long as human society existed, corruption and abuse of power would never be eliminated. Fantasy World was no exception. "Bribe? No, no, no. In return, I'll give him 1/10 of the profits of the goods every time I dock. To a certain extent, he's an important business partner like you. After all, compared to taking the subway to Ironforge and then crossing the wetlands, taking a ship is safer and more expensive. It's reasonable to pay a little profit." Old George had no intention of hiding anything. He openly revealed his relationship with the dock officials. As the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia had been using the identity of Countess Katrana Prester to form cliques to engage in political struggles, the nobles and officials in Storm City had long been filled with all kinds of greedy people. As long as there were enough benefits, they even dared to buy or sell military power, not to mention making use of the unbuilt dock to earn a little money. Interesting. Storm City is so rotten. It seems that I don't have to worry about exposing my warlock ability. Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a hint of playfulness. He then stood up and walked to the place where he slept. Simon quickly got up and followed closely behind. The two disappeared into the innermost room at the end of the passage. There wasn't much furniture and decorations, only a few wooden beds made of stencils. There weren't even any bedsheets or blankets. But for travelers who lived in the open, this was the perfect place to rest. At the very least, they could sleep peacefully until dawn without having to worry about the sudden attacks of wild beasts and monsters. The young man closed the door and carefully lay on the wooden bed closest to the door. He held a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. As long as there was any abnormal noise, he would immediately jump up and get ready to fight. It had to be said that although his combat strength was not very good, the vigilance that had been cultivated for a long time in the wild was very good. At least he could buy a few seconds of reaction time. He was definitely qualified to be cannon fodder. Zhang Qing ignored Simon. He took out a few crystal samples from his pocket that he had obtained more than half an hour ago. He tested the internal structure of each of them and the light radiation that was constantly emitted. Unfortunately, no matter what he did, the crystal's form was as stable as before. It was even more difficult to deal with than thorium and arcanite. However, he was not discouraged at all since he had already expected this. Instead, he became more energetic. Zhang Qing knew that these crystals were left behind by the Titan Ka's growth. It was normal that they could not be easily deciphered. Just as he was racking his brains on how to draw out the energy in the crystals for research, a wisp of dark energy suddenly flowed into the interior of a red crystal. Instantly, the energy in the crystal began to boil, as if it had been dropped into a pot of ice water. Then, a large number of fine cracks appeared on the surface of the crystal. Finally, it shattered with a crack and released a bright flame. However, unlike ordinary flames, this flame seemed to contain an extremely powerful life force. Under its light, Zhang Qing could clearly feel the dark energy in his body was afraid and retreating. It was not until the flame completely disappeared that it returned to normal. His exhaustion was also swept away. After experiencing the changes just now, his eyes lit up slightly. He quickly grabbed a few crystals of other colors and injected them with dark energy. The result was unbelievable. These crystals actually corresponded to the attributes of life, nature, magic, and earth. Red represented the basic elements necessary for life. Green represented air and water. Blue represented the energy that was everywhere in Azeroth. Yellow represented the earth that gave birth to everything. When all these things were added together, they could give birth to all kinds of life forms. It was even possible to adjust the radiation of these crystals to have a decisive impact on the evolution of life itself. For example, if a species was exposed to the radiation of red and yellow crystals for a long time, their body would become bigger and the cuticle and scales on the surface of their body would become thicker and thicker. If it was the radiation of blue and green crystals, they would become extraordinarily smart. They might even gain wonderful spell-like abilities. However, this effect would take hundreds of thousands of years, several generations, or even dozens of generations of continuous evolution. Chapter 330. Ever since he discovered how to draw out the strange energy contained within the crystal, Zhang Qing had begun various experiments on his way to Stormwind City. Similarly, the gnolls, kobolds, and murlocs that wandered at the edge of the forest had also ushered in an apocalyptic disaster. In just a few days, the corpses of thousands of strange mutated monsters could be seen on both sides of the road at regular intervals. Some of them had expanded several times their original size, while others had grown 2 heads, 4 legs, sharp bone spurs, reptilian scales, and so on. In short, none of them had died a natural death. It was just like the opening line of a famous television program. Why did the old Knoll man die naked on the streets? Why did hundreds of murlocs scream in the middle of the night? Why did the kobolds that were originally entrenched near the mine lose control of their bowels when they heard the footsteps of humans? Was the distortion of human nature behind all of this, or was it the decay of morality? Even the residents of Elwyn Forest began to spread rumors that there was a pervert who was using monsters to conduct evil and terrifying experiments. Of course, all of this had little to do with Zhang Qing, because he had already left Gold's Higher Town a day ago, and would arrive at the majestic gates of Stormwind City in a few hours. However, as the leader of the caravan, Old George subconsciously turned around and glanced at the last few kobolds that were tied behind the carriage with ropes. He lowered his voice and reminded, "Sir Mage, do you think you should deal with those little monsters first? The guards won't allow them to enter the city." "Don't worry, I've already prepared their share." As he spoke, Zhang Qing handed a small bottle of a dazzling purple jelly-like viscous liquid to his follower beside him. "Simon, feed each of them a drop. Remember, don't give them too much or you know the consequences." "As you wish, master." The young man carefully took the bottle, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He went straight to the back of the caravan, and forced the mouths of the Nye Kai kobolds to drink the viscous liquid one by one. He then ran forward without looking back. Not only him, but the coachman also cut the ropes that were tied to the back of the carriage and urged the horses to speed up, as if something terrible was about to happen. In just a few seconds, the kobold's body expanded at a speed visible to the naked eye, growing from about 1 meter to about 1.5 meters tall. Furthermore, for some reason, shiny scales grew on the surface of their wrinkled skin, and a small piece of azure crystal condensed on one of their foreheads. However, this strange phenomenon lasted for less than a minute. Most of the kobolds let out miserable cries, and not long after, they exploded. Blood and pieces of flesh were scattered everywhere, instantly dyeing the ground and grass red. Especially the ghastly sight of the internal organs, the guards who had seen many bloody scenes couldn't help but turn pale, and the contents of their stomachs surged up. Only the dog-headed man with the blue crystal managed to survive. He lay on the ground on the verge of death, his eyes glowing red as if begging for mercy. "Give it something to eat," Zhang Qing instructed as he stroked his chin with great interest. This was the only living being that had survived his inhumane experiments since he left the Western Spring Fortress. It had great research value. Enduring the pungent smell of blood, Simon opened a wooden barrel from the carriage and threw the bread, cheese, and some fresh fruits stored in it over. After the latter smelled the food, it immediately used all its strength to get up and wolf down the food. As it ate, the azure crystal on its head began to release a faint magical halo. Seeing this, old George couldn't help but ask, Is that the power of magic? You let a kobold gain the ability to cast spells?" "Yes. It is indeed magical energy, but whether it can be used is another matter. After all, kobolds are not creatures without intelligence. They may be very timid and weak, but as far as I know, they still have some talent in casting spells. Perhaps that drop of liquid filled with energy just now activated the talent hidden in its body," Zhang Qing explained in an uncertain tone. To be honest, when he gave the kobold the experimental potion, he didn't think that there would be a survivor. He just wanted to observe the changes in the kobold's body, accumulate experimental data, and slowly improve the formula to finally achieve the results he wanted. This was because the purple liquid not only contained the energy of the red and blue crystals, but also a small amount of tyrannical dragon blood. But now, it seemed that life itself was full of miracles, and anything could happen. A kobold at the bottom of the food chain in Azeroth was actually able to withstand a terrifying evolution that had been compressed for hundreds and thousands of years into a single moment. It was completely worthy of the word miracle. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, the unknown kobold seemed to have realized that it had undergone some indescribable changes. It lowered its head and stared at its hands. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, its hands suddenly emitted scorching flames. Before the caravan could react, a ball of fire hit a tree by the roadside. Boom! After a loud explosion, the thick fir tree was burnt to a crisp, and the pungent smell of burnt flesh irritated everyone's sense of smell. A spell-like ability, fireball? Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. It was important to know that under the influence of energy everywhere, many animals in Azeroth had evolved all kinds of strange spell-like abilities. For example, the giant spiders in the Scorching Gorge could spit out fireballs, and the petrifying lizards in Stranglethorn Vale, Shining Plain, and Tanaris. Different from spellcasters, these abilities didn't require incantations or complicated gestures. They were innate abilities that were integrated into their blood, and could be released with just a thought. Obviously, this kobold in front of them was like that. Judging from the changes in the blue crystal when it released the spell, the fireball wasn't its only ability. Jean De. Powerful. Jean De is willing to serve the great master. The kobold that had escaped death knelt down and stuttered in the common language. It wasn't stupid, and it knew that everything that had happened was the doing of the mage on the horse. It decisively chose to submit. Interesting research material. Simon, bring it to take a bath later. After saying that, Zhang Qing ignored old George's burning gaze and opened his notebook to organize the experimental data that he had obtained over the past few days. There was no doubt that a technology like this that could change the direction of evolution and make life more powerful was definitely subversive and dangerous. Before he could guarantee a 100% success rate, he would definitely not carry it out on himself, but at the same time, he wouldn't stop the research. Chapter 331. The appearance of the Kobold Kind completely shattered the caravan's understanding of the world. In their eyes, whether a person was noble or qualified to be a hero revered by tens of thousands of people was determined from the moment they were born. Especially things like talent, which would not be changed by external forces. But now, an ordinary kobold from the Elwyn Forest actually possessed unimaginable spellcasting abilities after being modified by a mysterious magical power. Temptation. An irresistible temptation. The temptation to change fate. For a moment, even the coachman's eyes were filled with heartfelt desire. Old George and Simon even hinted several times that they wanted to try the unknown new potion, until Zhang Qing warned them with a half-smile. "Are you sure you want to drink this thing? Have you forgotten how countless jackalains, kobolds, and murlocs died along the way? Or are you very confident in your luck and want to try it? The success rate is less than 1% or even lower." Old George seemed to recall the bodies of the monsters that died tragically by the roadside and subconsciously shuddered. "I'm sorry, Master, I was too impatient." Simon quickly lowered his head and apologized. "I understand that you all desire to obtain power. But don't forget that no matter what kind of power it is, you have to pay a corresponding price. The price that mages pay is time and energy, the price that warriors pay is hard work and sweat, the price that bandits pay is the realization of their brushes with death, and the price that priests pay is their firm belief. There is no power in the world that can be obtained without effort. The more easy it seems to be to obtain power, the greater the hidden danger behind it." After saying this, Zhang Qing touched the leather eye patch gently. To some extent, this demon eye and the warlock power in his body were obtained through shortcut. Although everything was normal now, the sleeping demon soul was still a huge hidden danger. It would not be strange if it backfired on him. As for Kind, he was alone at the back of the caravan, his hands constantly emitting colorful magical radiance. Judging from the restless elemental energy around him, his talent was undoubtedly closer to that of druids and shamans than mages. He even used natural healing spells several times. Old George sighed as he looked enviously at the dog-headed man who was like a child. "Sigh, I was too greedy." Zhang Qing smiled and shook his head. Greedy? No, my friend, it is not time yet. I promise that when the success rate of the medicine reaches 50%, I will give you a chance to choose. You too, Simon. I hope I can live until then. After experiencing a blow just now, the desire in old George's heart had become a lot calmer, and he did not continue to be entangled. On the other hand, Simon's eyes were shining with excitement and anticipation. He placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. The pitiful young man didn't know that in his master's eyes, he was just a test subject. Zhang Qing wanted to use him to gain a deeper understanding of the supernatural power used by the warrior, rage. He wanted to know what kind of energy system it was that it could allow a person to explode with the strength of a giant and the speed of a speeding motorcycle in a short period of time. Some legendary warriors could even create a destructive effect like a meteorite crater with a single blow. Coupled with a powerful weapon, they were simply endless killing machines. After traveling along the peaceful forest path for more than 2 hours, the caravan finally saw the tall white city wall rising on the horizon. Old George spoke briefly to the guard at the gate and expressed his intention. He then handed over a small bag of silver coins as the entrance tax. Soon, he was allowed to stay in the Storm City trade zone for a week. Although the dog-headed man-kind caused a small commotion, the guard decisively chose to shut up after seeing the violet ring on Zhang Qing's finger. No matter what, Dalaran was an opposing magic kingdom, and the Kirin Tor Council was inextricably linked with all the spellcasters in the alliance. He did not want to offend them because of a mere dog-headed man. After all, in the eyes of most elite soldiers, dog-headed men were just dog-headed men. They might be good mining slaves and troublemakers who could create a little chaos, but they would never be a real threat. After passing through the Bridge of Heroes where the statues of Turalian, Kagad, Kodran Wildhammer, Donna's Tolbane, and Illyria Windrunner were erected, the caravan finally entered the bustling trade zone. Although there had been a lot of scandals in Storm City recently, and the political struggle was getting more and more intense, these had little to do with ordinary civilians. The shops were still open for business, and customers were still buying food and cloth for their daily needs. It was as if the Phidia Brotherhood in the western wilderness, the Blackrock Orcs in the Redridge Mountains, and the undead, ogres, and werewolves in the Twilight Forest had nothing to do with them. Just as Zhang Qing was admiring the crisis hidden behind the false prosperity of the trade zone, old George suddenly raised his hand to signal the caravan to stop moving forward. He then jumped down from the carriage and went straight into an inn called Golden Rose. In less than a minute, he walked out with a beautiful woman in her 30s. She had a mature demeanor and curly short hair. "Let me introduce you. This is Alazan, the wife of my eldest son. Alazan, this is the Mr. Mage I mentioned to you when I passed by last time. It's an honor to meet you, Your Excellency. Please come in. I've already prepared a clean room and delicious food." The woman called Alazan bowed slightly and showed a beautiful smile. Because she was wearing a dark blue dress and a white shirt with a slit, her ample breasts involuntarily trembled twice when she bowed, causing the men to swallow their saliva. "Thank you." Out of habit, Zhang Qing casually returned a bow and stepped into the inn that was full of strange memories for him. In the game, this was the only place in Storm City where players could bind their Hearthstone. Especially in the classic 60s, countless players would set off from here to adventure and explore the unknown world. Similarly, countless players would return here to rest before leaving. It was just that in the game, the two-story building was only a few dozen square meters, but in reality, it covered an area of a few hundred square meters. Apart from the hall on the first floor for guests to eat, drink, and chat, there were a total of 60 guest rooms. According to the relatively backward productivity standards and population distribution of Azeroth, this scale was basically equivalent to a 5-star hotel on Earth. Chapter 332. There was soft light, a lively atmosphere, delicious food, and a variety of drinks with prices ranging from high to low. There was even a musician playing an unknown country tune on a lute. Feeling the lively atmosphere in the hall, Zhang Qing casually found a seat near the bar and sat down. He ordered the bartender, "Give me a glass of strawberry juice. Also, tell me what interesting things have happened in Stormwind City recently." The man in his 40s raised his head and glanced at the beautiful female owner standing at the door. Seeing her nod without batting an eyelid, the bartender opened a wooden barrel and filled a glass with dark red liquid. He gently placed it on the table and said, "Here, sir. This is on me." "Thank you." Zhang Qing, who was already a little thirsty, didn't waste any time. He picked up the glass and gulped it down. He then took a deep breath to relax his somewhat tired and tense mind. Although it was called strawberry juice, it was actually a special drink that had been slightly fermented and contained a certain amount of alcohol. It was said that due to the use of a lot of expensive sugar and ingredients, its price was far higher than ordinary alcohol. At the same time, it was also one of the only alcohol in Azeroth that he could swallow apart from wine and rum. As for the inferior ale that was full of impurities and had a pungent taste, it was simply not something that humans could drink. The bartender picked up the glass and filled it again. He then asked with a smile, "You said that you wanted to ask for information. What are you talking about?" "It doesn't matter what it is. I just want to know the current situation in the city." Zhang Qing deliberately shrugged his shoulders and pretended to be indifferent. In reality, he wanted to use some rumors to determine whether it was safe for him to go to the slaughtered lamb. However, the bartender obviously didn't know this. He just nodded his head and said, "All right. If you want to talk about the major events that have happened recently, there are only two. The first is that there was a riot in the prison of Stormwind City. Fortunately, Warden Servault reacted in time and took the initiative to seal the entrance. Right now, the important people are discussing whether to send troops to kill the criminals who started the rebellion. I heard that because of Countess Katrana Prester's strong opposition, nothing was done in the end. The other thing is that Marshal Reginald Windsor had a big argument with Countess Katrana Prester in the Parliament. He went to the Burning Plains alone to deal with the increasingly rampant Blackrock orcs. Oh, the Princess of the Onyx Dragon has finally made her move. Zhang Qing pursed his lips and muttered in a voice that only he could hear. There was no doubt that Onyxia could not wait to gain more authority and influence in the Stormwind Kingdom after personally planning the kidnapping of Varian Rin. Hence, she could not wait to get rid of anyone who could threaten her secretly. If she could not get rid of them, she would chase them out of Stormwind City. The young king, Anduin Rin, knew nothing about it. Bolvar for Dragon, the regent, was also captured by the gentle trap that the Black Dragon Princess weaved in her human female appearance. It could be said that whoever gained the favor of Countess Katrana Prester would be able to do whatever they wanted in the kingdom of Stormwind. If it wasn't for the fact that Marshal Reginald Windsor would return with the deciphered slate at some point in the future, fulfilling the prophecy that he had obtained in Karazhan and exposing her true identity, Zhang Qing wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to interfere and obtain enough benefits for himself. Unfortunately, doing so would definitely result in an extremely painful price to pay in the future. With Zhang Qing's current status and identity in Dalaran, there was no need for him to take this risk at all. Just as he was sipping his strawberry juice and thinking about how he should win the trust of the warlocks in the Alliance, an old dwarf with a white beard suddenly came over and said in a drunken tone, "Hey, young man, where did you get this dwarven flintlock?" Flintlock? Zhang Qing was stunned for a moment. Then, he lowered his head and saw the double-barreled mithril shotgun hanging on his waist that he hadn't used even once. A strange smile appeared on his face. "I bought this from a dwarf named Ovj Copperhammer at the Treasure Bay Market." "Why, do you know him? Ovj Copperhammer? Damn it. That little brat really ran off to strangle Thornvale without saying a word?" The old dwarf roared in exasperation. He didn't care about the strange gazes of the people around him at all. He waved his rock-like arm and hit the table hard until the bartender warned him that if there was a crack on the table, he would have to pay for it. You know Ovch Copperhammer? Zhang Qing stared at the grumpy dwarf with great interest. After all, the dwarf race would grow a thick beard once they reached adulthood. Whether they were 30 years old or 200 years old, there wasn't much difference in the eyes of humans. Of course. I'm his uncle. This bastard didn't obediently inherit the family business to be a qualified blacksmith. Instead, he went to learn some *T engineering from that damn dwarf. He even went out to adventure as a hunter. It really pisses me off. After saying that, the old dwarf began to hit the table hard again. His beard was also sticking up. It was very interesting. After listening to the other party's complaints, Zhang Qing couldn't help but respond with a smile. There's nothing wrong with engineering. At least the power of the flintlock is obvious to all, isn't it? What's so good about it? It's just some fancy gadget. How can it be as powerful as real swords, axes, and hammers? By the way, what kind of metal is the dagger hanging on your waist? How come I've never seen it before? The old dwarf cast his gaze at the short dagger that was flashing with strange red ripples. Zhang Qing took off the enchanted dagger that was made of Valyrian steel not long ago. You mean this? The old dwarf nodded quickly. Yes. I've never seen such a strange quenching technique. Can you show it to me? In return, I can promise to make you a weapon or a piece of armor for free. No problem, please. Zhang Qing handed over the dagger without hesitation. He also wanted to see if the dwarven blacksmiths of Azeroth could figure out the reason for the production of Valyrian steel and the strange energy it contained. Oh my god! This hardness, flexibility, and magical malleability, it's almost as good as a cast iron ingot. But with all due respect, other than the material, the craftsmanship of this dagger is completely useless. It's a waste of a good piece of steel. The old dwarf gave his evaluation directly. Seeing the other party's pained expression, Zhang Qing's eyes flashed with a trace of embarrassment. He then lowered his voice and asked, "Then can you determine how this metal is produced? What is it used for?" Chapter 333. No. What I meant was that you mentioned that it's very similar to radiant iron. As far as I know, radiant iron is a metal that contains divine power. It's used to make paladin armor, or weapons that can counter undead, shadow magic, and demons. But this dagger doesn't have any similar properties. Zhang Qing pretended to be serious as he interrupted the dwarf. At the same time, he threw out another question that was bothering him. As a transmigrator who was filled with curiosity and desire to explore, he had already done all sorts of tests on Valyrian steel, but the results were rather disappointing. Apart from having a higher melting point, being harder and more durable than normal steel, there was nothing redeeming about this metal. The only thing that puzzled him was why a Valyrian steel sword could kill an undead that couldn't be killed by normal weapons. Could it be that Valyrian steel happened to be able to counter the supernatural powers of the undead? Unfortunately, he hadn't seen any undead yet, so he couldn't verify it himself in the short term. Thus, his research on Valyrian steel had to stop. The dwarf didn't seem to be angry at being interrupted. Instead, he laughed heartily. Ha. I understand. You only saw the surface and didn't realize the root cause. Yes, radiant iron is a magical metal that contains the power of holy light. Even if a normal person uses radiant iron to make a weapon, it can still deal the same amount of damage to undead and demons as paladins and priests. I don't know if you've noticed, but the metal used in this dagger has a similar effect, especially against magical energy. Magical energy? Zhang Qing seemed to recall something. He raised his hand and released a faint arcane energy at the dagger. In an instant, these energies seemed to have hit an invisible barrier and were all bounced back. After discovering this, his eyes immediately lit up. The corners of his mouth curled up as he muttered to himself, "Oh, I understand now. It contains a special property that repels magic. In other words, it's anti-magic. That's right. Young man. You're very observant. You know, if you take this to the MI7, the top assassins will definitely be willing to pay a high price for it. Anti-magic metals are rare. At least, this is the first time I've seen one in my life. After saying that, the old dwarf reluctantly returned the dagger. Looking at the beautiful patterns on the surface of the Valyrian steel, Zhang Qing lowered his head in thought. After a full minute, a strange smile suddenly appeared on his face. He took the initiative to suggest, "My dear friend, I wonder if you're interested in using this metal to forge a weapon for me?" Do you mean to melt this dagger and reforge it into a new short sword? No problem. The old dwarf patted his chest and promised. As an experienced blacksmith, how could he let go of such a miraculous material like this anti-magic metal? At the same time, he was looking forward to what kind of interesting products he could create with this metal. No, there's no need to melt it down. I have enough in stock. However, the weapon I want to forge is a little special. I hope you won't be angry after hearing it. As the last word fell, Zhang Qing glanced around vigilantly. After confirming that no one was eavesdropping, he leaned over and whispered something into the other party's ear, who knew that it would have been better if he hadn't said anything. Once he did, the old dwarf immediately flew into a rage. Damn it! I am a blacksmith. Dwarven blacksmiths, you know? Not those dwarves who fiddled with parts. Please don't insult my profession. Calm down, buddy. I swear, as long as you help me, I'll leave enough metal for you to forge a real weapon. Whether it's a sword, a war hammer, an axe, or some armor, it's all up to you. Zhang Qing seemed to have predicted the dwarf's reaction and calmly offered his terms. Bullshit. You human mages are so cunning. Alright, deal. You can take the work with you, but you must carve my name on it. After much hesitation and struggle, the dwarf finally gritted his teeth and agreed. It couldn't be helped. Any ambitious dwarven blacksmith was eager to create a masterpiece in their lifetime, and he was no exception. As you wish, master. Zhang Qing pretended to be humble as he stood up and bowed slightly. However, the old dwarf didn't seem to appreciate it at all. He curled his lips and said, "Don't give me that. I'll say this first, I can forge this weapon for you, but you must provide a detailed design. You also need 10 thorium ingots, an arcane crystal no smaller than the size of your palm, 2 diamonds, and a ruby. Leave it to me. I can prepare all the materials in 4 hours at most." Zhang Qing gave a definite answer without even thinking. He even began to imagine himself holding this weapon in his hand at a critical moment, directly piercing through the enemy's various protective spells and making the enemy swallow their last breath in disbelief. If that's the case, then I'll go back and rest first. When the time comes, come find me at the 3rd house on the right side of the dwarf district. My name is Klein Bronzehammer. After saying this, the old dwarf grabbed the wine glass filled with strawberry juice, raised his head and gulped it down. He then burped and disappeared from the inn. As soon as he left, old George came over and asked softly, "Sir, you want to forge a weapon?" Yes. I suddenly thought of a good idea, and I'm going to put it into practice." "Oh right, this is the list of materials. Help me prepare it. Here are 50 gold coins. If it's not enough, you can deduct it from the next payment." Zhang Qing tore a piece of paper from his notebook and wrote down the things he needed to buy. He put it on the table together with the money bag. "Got it. I'll go there myself." Old George didn't try to ask for more inside information. He quickly stood up and left the inn. After all, things like thorium ingots were strictly military-controlled goods, even in Stormwind City. Only nobles and high-ranking officers were qualified to use weapons and armor made of thorium. He needed to use some special connections to get 10 thorium ingot. As for Zhang Qing, he continued to sit in front of the bar and chatted with the bartender. When he stood up and was about to go back to his room to rest, he suddenly realized that there was an extra piece of paper in his hand. It was written in the common language. In order to thank you for your help last time, I've specially prepared a small gift for you. Please be sure to come to the old district before dark. The old district? Should I say that it's really the MI7? I've only been in Stormwind City for less than 40 minutes, and Matthias Shaw already knows my location. He even secretly sent this note to me. Zhang Qing squeezed the note into a ball. He narrowed his eyes and scanned the hall, trying to find the spy who sent the letter. Chapter 334. The Old City was originally the ruins of Stormwind City that were occupied and destroyed by the orcs during the opening of the Dark Portal. Later, after a series of modifications and repairs, it was integrated into the new Stormwind City system. However, because too many old buildings were preserved, the largest area of Stormwind City looked a little complicated, especially the various dark and narrow alleys that gave birth to some shady things. For example, gangs or sex services, of course. It was through secretly controlling these gray channels that MI7 had enough funds to maintain its own operations and not be choked by Countess Katrana Prester. It was important to know that the Princess of the Black Dragon had used her influence in the Parliament to threaten to reduce military spending several times, forcing the officers and marshals in Stormwind City to submit to her tyranny. If Azeroth was not a magical world where power was paramount, she could have become an excellent politician and ruler with her mature and experienced political skills. However, it was a pity that compared to her father, who loved to destroy the world, and her brother, who loved to do biological research, Onyxia was still slightly weaker. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the first adult dragon whose head was hung on the city gate. Admiring the fantastical and interesting clothes of the girls, who worked in the special service industry on both sides of the road, Zhang Qing recalled the so-called plot while thinking about the purpose of Matthias Shaw's meeting. He did not believe the message on the note, nor did he think that the ace assassin asked him out just to express his gratitude, even though the magic plague could indeed cause a huge rift and distrust between the orcs and the Forsaken. Just as he was making all kinds of guesses in his mind, an arm quietly stretched out from the darkness, covered his nose, and dragged him from the main road into a dark alley. As a person who had experienced many assassinations, Zhang Qing did not show the slightest bit of panic. Before the other party could make the next move, he immediately cast Blink to break free. At the same time, he held up the ice shield and mana shield. The crystal at the top of the staff flashed with a dangerous violet light. Relax, young man. If I was hostile, it would not have been an arm that stretched out, but a dagger that slit your throat. After saying that, the masked man took off the mask on his face, revealing a familiar face. He was none other than the leader of MI7, Matthias Shaw. Damn it! Can't you King greet me in a normal way? Zhang Qing gritted his teeth and cursed in a low voice. No wonder he was so angry. If not for the fact that he didn't feel any hostility or killing intent, he wouldn't have used Flash as the first spell, but Arcane Explosion, Frost Nova, Shadow Burn, Death Coil, and other instant-cast destructive spells. I'm sorry, I'm being watched closely now, so I can only meet you in this way. Matthias Shaw sighed helplessly. Oh? You're the leader of MI7. Is there anyone in Storm City who dares to spy on you? Zhang Qing raised his eyebrows in surprise. Matthias Shaw smiled playfully, and replied in a slightly sarcastic tone, In this world, there are always a few people who think that they can control everything. So, when they are in power, they will do everything possible to plant spies in their midst. Unfortunately, there is one such person in Storm City, and she has also convinced the Council that the authority of MI7 needs to be restricted, so there have been a lot of annoying flies in my office recently. I see. You are being watched by our dear Countess, aren't you? Zhang Qing's eyes flashed with a shrewd light. In fact, MI7 had been different from most intelligence organizations ever since it was established. Instead of hiding in the dark, It stood in the open and announced its existence to everyone. Even after Matthias Shore accepted it, he launched a publicity campaign. Even the children knew that there was an invisible dagger protecting the residents of the city. Hence, it was not surprising that he was being watched by the princess of the Black Dragon. No matter what that woman is planning, she has really pissed me off this time. The King of Assassins' tone revealed his undisguised annoyance and disdain. Obviously, he didn't know that he wasn't facing an ordinary noblewoman this time, but a black dragon princess who could take people's lives. She was the only daughter of the most powerful black dragon among the guardian dragon kings, Deathwing Nazario. However, Zhang Qing did not have the intention to remind him. Instead, he smiled and said, "It seems that I have to mourn for the Countess. She has provoked a dangerous enemy that she should not have. I hope she is as smart as you." "Forget it. I didn't ask you to come here today to talk about this. Here, this is the little gift I promised you. I hope you like it." After saying that, Matthias Shore threw the gift box that he had prepared in advance. "This is..." After Zhang Qing opened the box, he immediately showed an expression of disbelief. Because the box contained nothing else but a container that emitted an evil aura. To be exact, it was a soul bag that warlocks used to store soul fragments. Soul fragments were different from other magical items, especially those that had powerful magical powers. They were very likely to break the binding and escape. The soul bag's function was equivalent to a prison, firmly binding the soul within the fragment. This also meant that the MI7 had probably found some clues about his warlock powers, which he thought was very well hidden. "How is it? Do you like it?" An assassin under my command had recently executed a forsaken warlock who tried to sneak into the wetlands. This interesting little thing was the spoils of war found on his body. Matthias Shore probed meaningfully. "It's a great gift. Thank you." Zhang Qing threw the box away without batting an eyelid. He fiddled with the soul bag that was sewn out of an unknown leather in his hand. "Just a thank you? Don't you need me to write a recommendation letter for you? After all, you are a lamb that has already been slaughtered. Those people will not easily trust an outsider, especially when this outsider is a mage from the Kirin Tor Parliament." Seeing that the other party had chosen to remain silent, Matthias Shore took the initiative to reveal his first trump card. The corner of Zhang Cheng's mouth twitched slightly. Without raising his head, he said, "You are still in contact with the Warlock Guild?" Matthias Shore nodded his head lightly. "Of course. They are one of the important allies of MI7. Many diehards who are unwilling to speak only need to be handed over to them for a spin, and I guarantee that they will tell you everything. However, I am a little curious. How did you suddenly become a warlock in such a short time? I am also very curious. Where did you find out that I have the power of a warlock?" Zhang Qing asked back, not to be outdone. "Ha ha ha ha. You are really an interesting young man. Why don't we exchange information?" "I can't ask for more." Chapter 335. I see, after the exchange of information that seemed cordial and friendly on the surface but was actually scheming against each other in secret, Matthias Shore's eyes revealed a look of sudden realization. Although he had more than 500 elite bandits who were adept at spying and assassinating, as well as more than 1,000 peripheral members, it was still too little compared to the vast land of the eastern continent. Furthermore, the Stormwind Kingdom had been conquered during the war with the orcs, and things related to magic had always been handled by mages and priests. Therefore, he did not know that the soul of an orc warlock from the Shadow Council was sealed in the depths of the Raven Ridge tomb. At the same time, Zhang Qing also got some news from the north from Shore. For example, after the magical plague spread in the Alterac Valley, the Frostwolf clan lost at least 2,000 to 3,000 orcs. It was not easy to control the epidemic through a destructive massacre. Now, many high-ranking orcs had begun to shout for the despicable living dead to be removed from the Horde camp. Some were even clamoring to destroy the Undercity to avenge their fallen brethren. However, due to the strong suppression of Great Chief Thrall, no substantial action had been taken for the time being. As for the Dark Queen Sylvanas, for some reason, she remained silent. She did not pay attention to the Frostwolf clan that had gathered to launch an attack, nor did she make any excuses. It was as if she had silently agreed. To some extent, if not for Varian Rin's recent disappearance and the Black Dragon Princess stirring up trouble in the Stormwind Kingdom, this would definitely be a good opportunity to send troops to the north and reclaim the territory of the Lordaeron Kingdom in one go. Feeling that Azeroth was about to be turbulent, Zhang Qing did not have any fear in his heart. Instead, he was full of anticipation. After all, only when the situation was completely chaotic could he use the chaos to get a lot of what he wanted. After all, whether it was the terrifying biological research being conducted by the Black Dragon Prince, the mountains of dragon eggs in Onyxia's nest, or the precious magical knowledge hidden in the library of the Mallet of Misfortune that had been hidden for tens of thousands of years, they would all give him unimaginable power and knowledge. It was far from what the Song of Ice and Fire, which was not systematic, could compare to. Matthias Shaw did not know how many dangerous plans the young man in front of him had in mind. After sorting out the information he had received, he quickly nodded with a smile. "All right, I know what's going on. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone about you becoming a warlock, but in exchange, I hope you can provide some help to MI7 when they need it." "No problem. However, you have to pay me according to the degree of danger, and I have the right to refuse any risky actions that may endanger my life." Zhang Qing bargained without hesitation. "Sure. From now on, you will be an index finger, and I will personally be in charge of you. Oh, I almost forgot. Here, this is a deception jewel. It allows you to change your appearance and race at will. It's an excellent magic tool. As for the Warlocks Guild, I'll send someone to greet them. You can report there in 2 days. Also, thank you for the information you provided. Now that I know where the Phidia Brotherhood is, it's time to deal a fatal blow to my old friend." As the last word left his mouth, Matthias Shaw quickly disappeared into the shadows and disappeared without a trace. Obviously, Zhang Qing, who had no integrity at all, had eaten up the promise he made to Edwin Van Cleef and sold it at a good price. It was not that he did not keep his promise, but the spies of MI7 had already infiltrated the Brotherhood. It would not take long for them to find out everything. His betrayal had only sped up the process. Moreover, in order to hide the fact that there was a terrifying demon sealed in his body, he had no choice but to use the Brotherhood to divert the other party's attention. After staring at the empty alley for 5 or 6 minutes, Zhang Qing finally heaved a sigh of relief. He sighed in a voice that only he could hear. He is indeed the king of assassins in this world. No wonder even the great mage cannot sleep at night when he hears his name. Although he had absolute confidence in defeating Matthias Shaw in a head-on battle, the cruel reality was that Matthias Shaw would never fight with anyone head-on. This man would patiently hide in the dark like a hunter, waiting for his prey to be tired and let down his guard. Then, he would use a sharp dagger to pierce his opponent's jaw or heart. No mortal could remain vigilant for 24 hours a day. Even powerful spellcasters like Jaina and Ronin were no exception. Most of the time, the strength of a mage was based on the protection of a safe fortress. If they did not get a good rest for a long time, they would be exhausted after a few weeks at most. Even when casting spells, they would not be able to concentrate and would suffer from magic backlash. This was also why every mage was keen on collecting powerful followers. Some even joined the kingdom in exchange for a relatively safe living environment. After understanding this point, Zhang Qing's desire to establish his own force grew even stronger. With the germinating ambition, he quickly crossed the streets of the old city and came to the door of a blacksmith shop called Thunder. Even though Stormwind City was the capital of the human kingdom, there were many other races living here as well. Especially after the miracle of the underground train, a large number of dwarves and pygmies came one after another, opening shops one after another. At a glance, the entire dwarf district was filled with tall chimneys and black smoke that constantly emitted from them to pollute the environment. It was comparable to the heavy industrial parks during the first industrial revolution on Earth. Especially the choking smell of the smoke. Even a breath would cause one to cough for a long time. Zhang Qing really did not know how these dwarves and pygmies could survive in such a harsh environment. If it were an earthling, they would have contracted respiratory diseases in just a few months. However, complaining was just complaining. He still resisted the itch in his throat and nasal cavity and strode into the blacksmith shop. He shouted at the top of his voice, "Is Klein Bronzehammer here? Who's calling me?" The old dwarf, who was sweating profusely, asked without raising his head as he waved his hammer. "It's me. According to our agreement, I've brought what you want." Zhang Qing did not waste any time and threw the leather pouch that he had just taken out from his magic waist pouch on the table. "So fast?" Klein Bronzehammer seemed to be in disbelief. He quickly opened the pouch and poured out the contents. 10 pieces of thorium ingots that shone with a dark green glimmer, an arcane crystal that contained powerful energy, 2 beautiful large diamonds, a baby-sized sapphire, and a blueprint with a scale mark. Everything he had asked for was here. Chapter 336. Accompanied by the clanging of the anvils and the hissing of the quenching process, the entire blacksmith shop was quickly set to work under the command of Klein Bronzehammer. Not long after, the thorium ingots and Valyrian steel were melted into liquid in the high-temperature furnace. Then, with the help of Zhang Qing's alchemy, the powerful energy of the arcane crystal was slowly absorbed into the pincers until the pincers were shining with a bright golden light. Seeing that the time was right, the old dwarf immediately waved his short and thick arms and shouted, "Molds! Bring the molds over!" In the blink of an eye, the 2 apprentices threw the molds, which were made of steel, onto the workbench. Then, together, they used the pincers to hold the hot pincers and poured the molds into the molds one by one. When the molds began to solidify, they directly threw the molds into a cold bucket of water. In an instant, white steam filled every corner of the shop, adding a sense of mystery to it. However, this mysterious feeling soon disappeared without a trace. Instead, it was replaced by the sound of grinding that gave one goosebump. In order to meet the requirements of the blueprint, Klein Bronzehammer personally used a special stone grinding wheel from Azeroth's mines to grind the parts to make sure that every part was perfect. There was no doubt that this was a laborious and time-consuming job, especially with the spiral hollow tube inside. It was not something that an ordinary blacksmith could make. After about 5 hours, it was midnight in Stormwind City. Klein put down the 14th grinding wheel, which was so worn that it could no longer be used, and complained with a tired face, "Damn it, it's finally done. Hurry up and assemble it. Let me see what you've made. It's different from any gun I've seen before." "Haha, don't worry, my friend. You'll soon understand what a great work you've made." After saying that, Zhang Qing skillfully assembled the parts on the workbench. In less than a minute, a revolver that did not belong to Azeroth appeared in his hands. However, the spellbreaker was not yet complete, so he ignored the curious eyes of the dwarves and began to carve strange runes on the surface of the gun with a special carving knife. Some of them were arcane runes used by the mages of Dalaran, and some were demonic runes used by the demons of the Burning Legion. However, the most important thing was to decipher the mysterious runes that belonged to the magical earth. The reason was simple. Among the 3 different systems of runes, the arcane runes were used to guide energy, while the demonic runes were used to increase the destructive power of the bullet. Only runes from an unknown magic civilization could combine to produce a mysterious anti-magic field. Finally, with the bullets made of Valyrian steel, except for physical defensive spells like Ice Shield, the bullets could directly penetrate force field-type defenses like Mana Shield. It was definitely a spellcaster's nightmare. In particular, the gunpowder used in the world of Azeroth was not sulfur, charcoal, saltpeter, mercury fulmination, nitrocellulose, and other chemical substances. It was a crystallization of some kind of magical energy in minerals, and the explosive power was 100 times more terrifying than the former. This could be seen from the guns made by Azeroth. After all the guns in Azeroth did not have a rifled, which was the so-called musket. However, this primitive firearm, which was known to lack both range and accuracy, was actually able to fly 300 to 400 meters away after using the gunpowder provided by the goblin and gnome engineers. It could even penetrate a tree trunk as thick as an adult's waist. That's right. It was not embedded. It was penetrated. Even the most powerful anti-material sniper rifle produced on Earth was not as powerful as this. It was because of this that Zhang Qingji thought of creating a magic breaker spear as a trump card to deal with Catherine, the Witch of Desire, who harbored malicious intentions. In any case, telekinesis was a type of supernatural magic. It was essentially the control of energy, so it would naturally be rejected by magic-breaking bullets and anti-magic field. He really wanted to know if one day the two sides really fell out, and Catherine found out that she was killed by the gun that she looked down on the most, would her expression be very interesting? In fact, it was not just the Witch of Desire. Most of the residents of the underground world relied on various abilities and looked down on ordinary people. They even thought that they were the true masters of the world. They did not understand that since the middle of the 20th century, the technology that humans relied on for survival had developed at an incredible speed. Whether it was nuclear weapons, biochemical weapons, genetic weapons, or laser weapons, they were all enough to pose a huge threat to the underground world. The reason why the underground world still existed was because of the superpowers they possessed, but more importantly, it was because of the secrecy mechanism set by the Parliament. That was to never let ordinary people know of their existence. Originally, Zhang Qing wanted to create an exquisite crossbow, but after thinking about it, a handgun was far more powerful and had a longer range than a crossbow. It was also more in line with the habit of everyone in North America to carry a gun. At the same time, it could also serve as a disguise. With the idea of ruthlessly tricking his enemy, he finished carving the last rune and immediately smashed the expensive ruby and diamond into pieces. With the help of a shape-shifting spell, he covered all the magic runes on the surface of the runes, forming a layer of glittering barrier. This way, even if he used detection spells, he would not be able to detect anything wrong immediately. Finally, he brushed on a thick layer of mithril powder, and a sparkling magic-breaking revolver was completed. Gently pulling the trigger and feeling the terrifying power contained in this weapon, Zhang Qing's eyes shone with a strange light. After a while, he turned his head and said to the old dwarf behind him, "How is it? The weapon I designed is very beautiful, isn't it?" "TSK. I really don't understand what your brain is thinking. You're obviously a mage, but you created a weapon that can easily kill spellcasters. How strange." The old dwarf rolled his eyes and sat down on the ground. He took out a pipe out of nowhere and stuffed some tobacco leaves into it. Then, he began to smoke calmly. "So what if I'm a mage? Who said that mages can't use guns? In times of danger, the most important thing is to defeat the enemy and survive. The method and process are not important. Oh, right, help me make some bullets with magic-breaking metal. I'll come back in half a month. Also, this is the metal and payment I promised you." After saying that, Zhang Qing placed 2 pieces of Valyrian steel and a small bag of gold coins on the workbench. He turned around and walked into the street that was shrouded in the last trace of darkness before dawn. Looking at his back that was gradually disappearing, Clane Bronze Hammer smacked his lips and muttered something. He reached out his hand and gently stroked the smooth surface of the weapon like a lover. The shape of a sword quickly appeared in his mind. Chapter 337. In the Slaughtered Lamb Inn in the Mage District of Storm City, The bartender Zalei Moore was carefully wiping the table as if this was a very important and sacred job. He didn't care that there hadn't been a single guest in the past half a month. Looking at the outrageous prices of drinks and food posted at the door, anyone with a little brain wouldn't walk in and be ripped off. Of course, as the stronghold of the Warlock Guild in the Storm Kingdom, he didn't care about the meager profit. His only purpose was to hide the Warlock community hiding in the huge basement of the inn for research and teaching. Just as he finished wiping the table for the last time and was about to hang up the closed sign, a thin figure suddenly barged in. The other party was 13 or 14 years old, with short blonde hair and dark blue pupils. He wore a dark blue robe with fine workmanship, and with a handsome face, he looked like a boy from a noble family. After seeing the appearance of the newcomer, Zalei Moore frowned subconsciously, and then scolded in a low voice, "Child, leave quickly, this is not a place for you to play." "Play? No, I'm not here to play, I'm here to learn how to become a warlock." The young man pursed his lips and explained proudly. "Warlock? Damn it! Where did you hear this word?" Zalei Moore's pupils suddenly contracted, and he subconsciously grasped the staff hidden in his sleeve. Ever since Ironforge Castle's king, Magni Bronzebeard, began to ostracize and monitor the warlocks who obtained power from the demons, the Warlock Guild had no choice but to split up and find a new place to settle down. The chaotic Stormwind City had undoubtedly become their ideal hiding place. But unfortunately, even though they won the trust of MI7 through a series of cooperation, the upper-class nobles who experienced the invasion of the orcs still felt that the warlocks were the pawns of the Burning Legion, and they were the black sheep that must be eradicated. So, this temporary base still had to be hidden in the dark, or it would be taken down by the Storm City's city management team at any time. The young man seemed to have expected the other party's reaction. He smiled and took out a letter with a capital M symbol from his arms and shook it. "Take it, this is my recommendation letter, I believe you should have already been notified." "It's you." Zalei Moore opened it and glanced at it. A surprised expression immediately appeared on his face. It was because the person who wrote the letter was none other than the leader of MI7, the famous king of assassins, Matthias Shore. Although he already knew that there would be a mysterious person coming to the Warlock Guild in the next few days to learn all kinds of dangerous dark magic knowledge, but he never thought that it would be a child. One had to know that warlocks were different from other professions. Not only did they need to be extremely talented, but they also needed a firm and unwavering will. Most warlocks were originally mages, priests, shamans, and other spellcasting professions. Most of them had a mature outlook on life and values. They were willing to pay the price for the pursuit of greater power, even if the price was their lives and souls. If one did not have a mature mind, not to mention learning the knowledge of the dark taboo, just the ability to summon demons would cause one to lose oneself unknowingly and become a puppet at the mercy of the other party. Why? Are you surprised? Don't worry, I'm not an ordinary child. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get this recommendation letter, right? The youth asked with a faint smile. Obviously, he was none other than Zhang Qing, who had used the Orb of Deceit to change his appearance and age. A few hours ago, he had finally received the recommendation letter from Matthias Shore. Naturally, he had to come here to pay his respects and learn systematically from the beginning. Just like when he first got the mage profession template, he had to soak in the Dalaran library for a period of time until all the external forces were firmly under his control. Of course, in order to not expose his true identity, he chose to transform into a blonde youth. At the same time, he also picked up the alias Mason Asplin, which he had used many times before. Alright, follow me. Remember, no matter what you see, please keep quiet. The masters don't like noisy apprentices, Zalei Moore reminded him with a serious face. Zhang Qing deliberately pretended to be indifferent and shrugged his shoulders. Got it. I'm not a country bumpkin who hasn't seen the world. What an unpleasant tone. I'm starting to doubt whether you can survive the apprenticeship period. Zelaymor muttered softly as he closed the door and opened the secret passage hidden behind the wine rack. Under his lead, the two of them passed through the narrow spiral passage and soon came to a very spacious underground hall. There were more than 30 men and women in red or black robes, each busy with their own affairs. Some were summoning low-level demons with the help of fixed magic circles, some were practicing shadow arrows and curses against targets and small animals, and some were constantly extracting energy from the burning evil flames. Although he had long known that the warlock stronghold of Storm City would definitely see some unusual things, Zhang Qing never thought that the other party would be so blatant. It should be known that a few streets away was the Royal Mage Tower, which monitored all the abnormal supernatural energy in Storm City. Not to mention summoning demons, even the release of a small magic missile would be instantly detected. Could it be that these mages were selectively blind? Or was there some unspeakable deal between the two sides? For a moment, countless guesses emerged in his mind. He even suspected that the Princess of the Black Dragon deliberately connived with the Warlock Guild, wanting to use these guys who worshipped power to balance the Royal Mage Regiment. Just as Zhang Qing began to use his scrutinizing eyes to select the most powerful few people, a woman with long black hair suddenly stopped and narrowed her eyes, staring at him with an extremely dangerous gaze. After a full minute, she frowned and asked, "Who is this little guy?" "Master Ursula Dellin. He's Mason recommended by MI7. Zelaymor hurriedly put one hand on his chest and replied with a deep bow. It could be seen that he was full of awe and fear of this woman, and he did not even dare to look at her. A new toy sent by Matthias Shore? The woman called Ursula Dellin raised the corner of her mouth, revealing a cruel smile. When Zelaymor heard this, he was so scared that he trembled and immediately stuttered to explain. "Master, please don't misunderstand, he's not a toy, but an apprentice who's here to learn the casting skills of a warlock." Apprentice? Has MI7 started to cultivate warlocks? This is good news. Ursula Dellin bent down and looked into Zhang Qing's eyes, trying to find negative emotions such as fear and panic. Chapter 338. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. This little guy has a very different soul from ordinary people, and he is not afraid of me at all. Zeri, leave him to me. From today onwards, he will be my apprentice. After saying this, Ursula Dellin did not care about the strange looks of the people around her. She pulled Zhang Qing, who was disguised by the orb of deceit, and walked straight into the depths of the underground. Zhang Qing did not resist or refuse. A hint of sarcasm flashed in his eyes, and he followed obediently. He had a hunch that this woman did not only want to teach him all kinds of dark knowledge and magic, but also treated him as a toy, a test subject, just like what he had done before. Watching the two figures gradually disappear into the distance, Zeri breathed a sigh of relief. He said to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Good luck, child. You know, the most dangerous woman in the entire base. I am afraid that you are your teacher." After going through the complex passageway twice, the two came to a place that looked like a bedroom. There were not many furnishings in the room. There was only a bed, a table, a chair and a huge demonic rune in the middle of the room that shone with a dark purple light. As a victim of a large amount of sorcerer knowledge forced into his mind, Zhang Qing recognized the function of the rune at a glance. It was to connect Azeroth and distort space and time. Although it was far from a real summoning circle, it could still summon the lowest level of the Burning Legion, such as imps. Many sorcerers use the power of the demonic rune to summon low-level demons to disturb the enemy, or to slow down the enemy's movement. The only thing that Zhang Qing did not understand was why Ursula had set up such a rune in his room. Just when he was puzzled, Ursula suddenly turned around and said in a teasing tone, "I believe that you must be wondering why I accepted you as my apprentice, right? Is it not because of the recommendation letter from Master Matthias Shore?" Zhang Qing deliberately pretended to have a backer look and blinked. No, cute little fellow, the reason why I chose you is because you are a good lamb, very much to my taste. Now I will give you a small test. Summon a lowly demon and force it to become your servant. If you can't do it, then I'm afraid you won't be able to walk out of this room alive. Just as he finished speaking, without warning, Ursula Durling raised her hand and snapped her fingers. In an instant, the runes that were originally emitting a dim light suddenly lit up. In less than half a minute, a spatial portal appeared in the middle of the room. Although it was only about 1 meter, it was enough for demons like Imp and Hellhound to pass through. Without a doubt, for an apprentice warlock, this was absolutely a deadly plaything. If it was an imp, then it was still okay, but if it was a spellcaster's nemesis, the Hellhound, then there was a 100% chance that they would be torn apart and eaten alive. What do you want? In order to appear more like a clever teenager, Zhang Qing appropriately added a little fear into his expression to make himself look like he wanted to remain calm and tough, but in his heart, he was afraid of the demon that was about to appear. Ursula Durling nodded satisfactorily. She bent down and whispered in his ear, "Remember, my cute little lamb, I've set up a protection in the portal, but this protection can only last for 4 hours. This means that in 4 hours, you can freely flip through the books and notes in this room until you find a way to make the demon submit to you. If you can't control the demon that passes through the distorted space and time within the stipulated time, then you will become its food." "You mean, I only need to make a demon my servant, right?" Zhang Qing confirmed without raising his head. "That's right. Also, do you know why this place is called a slaughtered lamb? The answer is very simple. Every newcomer who steps into the realm of warlocks is a delicious lamb to the demons. They either do whatever it takes to gain power and eventually become the demon's master, or hide in a corner like a coward and eventually be devoured by the demon. I'm very interested to see which kind you will become." After that, Ursula's eyes flashed with a powerful shadow power. She locked the door from the outside and walked upstairs without looking back. When the footsteps completely disappeared, the fear on Zhang Cheng's face immediately disappeared and was replaced by a contemptuous smile. He first removed the disguise of the Orb of Deceit and returned to his original appearance. Then he directly injected the surging dark energy in his body into the portal. In less than 3 to 5 minutes, the height of the portal had expanded to more than 2 meters. At the same time, slight cracks appeared on the demonic runes on the ground. Realizing that this was the limit of the demonic runes, he did not hesitate to take out a handful of soul fragments that he extracted from the knolls and threw them into the distorted space and time. The next second, a pair of disproportionate claws appeared out of thin air. Then came the long, pointy ears, the facial features of a deformed human, a thin body and strong legs. There was no need to ask to know that it was an imp at the bottom of the Burning Legion. But unlike ordinary imps, the evil flames on its body burned especially vigorously. Its blazing eye sockets were not filled with madness like its own kind, but instead were filled with cunning. It kept looking around as if to ascertain its own situation. Looking at the soul fragments in the imp's hand, Zhang Qing pursed his lips and asked in standard demonic language, "Tell me, what's your name?" "Warlock, you should know the rules. Before you defeat me, I can't tell you my name, and I can't sign any contract with you." The imp opened its mouth and shrieked. Not sure if it had sensed the danger or was just being cautious, but it did not have the intention to attack. Zhang Qing knew that this cunning imp was testing him. Once it confirmed that he was not strong enough, it would turn hostile faster than flipping the pages of a book. Plus, he did not want to waste too much time on this boring little game. So after hesitating for a moment, he gently took off the blindfold on his left eye. When the shadow of Arita's demon, Malasa, appeared in his pupil, the imp immediately knelt on the ground as if it had seen its natural enemy. It trembled and begged, "Great Lord! Your humble servant, Kupnik, begs for your forgiveness. Don't kill me. I'm willing to do anything for you." Then what are you waiting for? Quickly come and sign a contract with me. I just happen to need a slave to run errands. As he spoke, a book suddenly appeared in Zhang Cheng's hand. It was a book called The Book of Control. Chapter 339. As a sinister and cunning brat, Kupnik had countless tricks to add something to the contract that was beneficial to him. But in front of the Book of Demonic Control, any little trick would instantly reveal its true form, even the invisible words that many demons often used. After several attempts to conceal its identity, it finally gave up all the unrealistic ideas and obediently wrote its real name on it with blood. The moment the last letter was written, it immediately felt that its connection with the distorted space and time was cut off, and its soul was firmly bound to the demonic tome. In other words, if it accidentally died, it could no longer return to the Burning Legion's lair in its soul state to wait for resurrection. Instead, it would be sucked into the demonic tome until its master showed mercy and resurrected it. Of course, this resurrection was not without a price. Not only did it require a lot of dark energy, but it also required enough soul fragment. Looking at the trembling brat kneeling at his feet, Zhang Qing gently closed the demonic tome of demonic control and said in an emotionless tone, "Very good. Now you are my servant, Kupnik. Tell me, what abilities do you have?" Flame Shield, Flame Arrow, Blood Pact, Phase Shift, Fire Rain, Fire Immunity Shield. The brat listed 7 or 8 of its abilities in one breath. There was no doubt that compared to most of its kind, it was much stronger, especially the green dark energy flame around its body, which was enough to burn all enemies near it. An ordinary person would probably become a lifeless charred corpse in less than 10 seconds. Not bad, looks like I don't have to kill you and continue to look for a new servant. Zhang Qing smiled maliciously as he withdrew the dark energy he had injected into the portal. After a while, the 2-meter-tall portal returned to its original state. He ignored the dozens of sneaky glances on the other side of the portal and picked up a book on Introduction to Shadow Magic from the bookshelf. Then, without raising his head, he ordered, "Watch the portal for me. If one of your kind enters the room, I'll break your neck." "Yes, great master. Your will is my command." Kupnik lowered his head humbly and bowed deeply. As a low-level cannon fodder of the Burning Legion, it had an innate reverence for high-level demons. It could not even muster the slightest thought of resisting. Although he didn't understand why a mortal would have the soul of the demon lord of Arita, he knew that his boss, Sargeras, had once controlled Mediv to open the dark portal and let the orcs, who were tainted by demonic blood, invade Azeroth. Therefore, he instinctively felt that this was part of the army's conspiracy. Soon, under the temptation of the soul fragments, a dozen little ghosts could not help but rush out. Staring at his own kind, Kupnik let out an ear-piercing laugh and shot out a steady stream of dark green fell fireballs, killing his opponents at the border between the distorted space and Azeroth. He had no intention of showing any mercy at all. In fact, the Burning Legion wasn't an organization known for its order and discipline. Chaos, slaughter, and destruction were their essence. Killing one another was as easy as eating and drinking. Through the corner of his eye, Zhang Qing memorized the various abilities that Kupnik had shown in the battle and silently compared them. First of all, the ability that he used most frequently, Flame Arrow, was actually the Fell Fire. Its power was far more terrifying than ordinary fire spells. At least it could not be extinguished by ordinary water, and it did not require chanting or casting actions. It could release one every 2 seconds, and there was no sign of energy exhaustion even after releasing 20 or 30 of them in a row. The second was the Flame Shield, which formed a ring of fire around the target's body. Anyone who came close would be burned by the high temperature of the flames. The effect lasted for about 3 to 5 minutes. Although the damage was a little low, it could cause the enemy to feel intense pain. The third ability was Phase Shift, which temporarily hid oneself in a space crack to avoid all magic and physical attack. The difference between this ability and the game was that it could be used flexibly even in battle. The only drawback was that once the phase shift started, it could not be stopped. The fourth ability was Blood Contract, which gave himself and his allies a strong vitality by burning the power of his own demon blood. However, Zhang Qing thought that this kind of increased vitality was a good thing. If he used it too many times, his body would be contaminated by evil energy, and he would become a monster like an evil orc or evil elf. The last two spells, Flame Immunity Shield and Fire Rain, had not been used yet, so there was no way to judge. Obviously, Kupnik's combat power was not as weak as the little demons summoned by the warlocks in the game. Instead, it was a little similar to the small boss in the Mallet of Doom that dropped the Crescent Key. Just as Zhang Qing was thinking about how to bring this interesting little demon back to Earth, there was a sudden sound of footsteps outside the door. Out of caution, he hurriedly put on an eye mask and used the Orb of Deception to disguise himself as a blonde boy. About 2 or 3 minutes later, the locked door was opened again. Ursula Derlin came in with a doomsday guard that was more than 2.5 meters tall and held a sharp giant axe. She first glanced at Kupnik, who was next to the portal, and then looked at Zhang Qing, who was sitting quietly in a chair and reading. Her face showed undisguised surprise. Incredible! You actually survived. You even signed a contract with a little demon. Why, from your tone, you seem to be looking forward to seeing my mutilated body. Zhang Qing curled his lips in disdain. No, of course not. I just didn't expect that someone could complete the trial without systematic learning. It seems that Matthias Shore recommended you for a reason. After saying that, Ursula raised her hand and shot a hazy green light at the Doomsday Guard. In less than a second, the tall demon's body gradually turned into nothingness and finally disappeared without a trace. Needless to say, it was banished back to the twisted nether. Warlocks were not as considerate to the demons they summoned as hunters were to their animal companions. On the contrary, they were full of vigilance against demons. If they were not careful, they would be devoured by the demons as nourishment to strengthen themselves. Therefore, their attitude was extremely bad. Some warlocks would even torture the demons that had signed a contract with them for fun. Kupnik lowered his head and carefully observed the strange woman who walked into the room, as if he wanted to figure out what had happened, why his powerful master had to disguise herself, and what kind of conspiracy and secret were hidden behind. Chapter 340. After Zhang Qing passed Ursula Dellin's test, he finally succeeded in entering the group of warlocks. He became an apprentice in name and began to learn the dangerous knowledge of dark magic. However, unlike the Dalaran mages, the warlocks seemed to prefer to seize power from demons at all costs, especially all kinds of bloody and cruel sacrifices, which made people's scalps tingle. Some of them were monsters caught alive by hired adventurers, and some were special criminals caught by MI7 that were not convenient to execute personally. In short, in just half a month, Zhang Qing saw more than 30 fresh lives and souls being devoured by demons, and the strength of the warlocks who held the ceremony was increasing at an incredible speed. It was no wonder that when the warlock profession appeared in the orc tribe, it quickly crowded out the shamans who originally occupied the dominant position. Just this amazing speed of improvement was enough to make countless spellcasters scramble for it. Of course, there was a so-called price to be paid to obtain any power. The price that warlocks paid was either their own blood, or to seize the souls of others through killing, or to integrate their whole body and mind into the abyss of darkness and depravity. In Azeroth, there was no profession more dangerous than warlocks. The slightest carelessness could cause one to lose self-awareness and completely become a beast driven by the dark side of human nature and endless desires, or even the claws of the Burning Legion. Simply put, a warlock used a part of himself as a bargaining chip to gain power through transactions. The more you paid, the more power you would get. In theory, as long as one's will was strong enough to withstand the strong side effects of the exchange of power, they could obtain spellcasting abilities that surpassed the Kirin Tor Council's archmages in a short time. Warlocks were so powerful, and the power they held was so tempting. Therefore, even if they risked death and being wanted, there was still a steady stream of people joining them. Just within half a month, there were more than 5 warlocks and apprentices who had gone mad or died. However, the life and death of these people did not have much to do with Zhang Qing. At present, he was fully focused on the hellhound that was close at hand. His mind was full of thoughts on how to defeat it without exposing his strength and using only a warlock spell that matched his identity. After all, this time there were 4 pairs of eyes that were full of scrutiny. He could not directly reveal the demon's eye like he did with Kupnik. In addition, the ability of the Hellhound was originally very effective against spellcasters, so it was impossible to end the battle quickly. In the early days of the game, there was a very classic joke. A mage was wandering in the wild and suddenly found a warlock from the opposing faction on the side of the road. He immediately dismounted and skillfully cast an icicle, intending to take advantage of this opportunity to kill the warlock. In the end, the demon summoned by the warlock, the Hellhound, rushed up and started chasing after the mage. In the blink of an eye, the mage's arcane wisdom, ice armor, and frost armor were all eaten clean, and it even countered a few spells. Although the mage tried his best to kill this hateful dog, he did not know that the Hellhound's magic resistance was unbelievably high. In the end, he was bitten to death by the Hellhound after exhausting all his mana. When the warlock player returned to the front of the monitor, he was surprised to find that a skeleton had appeared next to him. Although the description of the story was slightly exaggerated, it also showed how difficult it was to deal with the Hellhound in the eyes of spellcasters. Just as Zhang Qing was considering whether or not he should use Banish to buy some time, the Hellhound that was lying motionless on the ground suddenly opened its mouth full of sharp teeth and pounced forward. Damn it! He had no time to react. He could only activate the magic armor to cover the surface of his skin with a layer of hard, demon-like stratum corneum. Then, he smashed down with his right elbow. Bang! With a muffled sound, 2 of the Hellhound's sharp teeth fell off, but it also bit his arm at the same time. Fortunately, the magic armor's function was to give the warlock a demon-like defense and regeneration ability, so it did not break the bone. It only tore off a large piece of bloody flesh, and the wound stopped bleeding in less than 5 seconds. Good job. Just you wait. Zhang Qing, who felt the piercing pain, pretended to be fierce and quickly cast corrosion and painful curse on the Hellhound. Kacha! Kacha! The whispering hound, who was attacked, instantly became ferocious, but because there was no sound, the strange sound of teeth grinding was a sign of its anger. The 2 antennae on the top of its head also released a faint black light. The next second, the magic armor on Zhang Qing disappeared without a trace for some unknown reason. What was more strange was that the abscesses caused by the corrosion and painful curse on the whispering hound's body disappeared. Ursula saw this scene and immediately reminded him with a smile, "Wow, the devouring spell. My dear apprentice, I don't know if I should say that you're lucky or unlucky. You should know that not every Hellhound has this ability before systematic training. As long as you can defeat it, you'll soon get an unexpected reward. I think that this Hellhound will soon be able to eat the soul of its dreams." Another male warlock with the title of Master pursed his lips and said sarcastically, "As the leaders of the stronghold of Stormwind City, they would not interfere with the apprentices who were undergoing the trial, let alone help the apprentices defeat the demons, even if the apprentices would be killed by the summoned demons in the end." Zhang Qing did not pay attention to these fellows whose hearts had long been swallowed by darkness. Before the Hellhound launched its second attack, he raised his left hand and loudly chanted a spell. In the blink of an eye, shadow energy was injected into the Hellhound's body, maximizing the most terrifying scene in the Hellhound's subconscious. The hellhound trembled and turned around, trying to escape through the portal back to the distorted space. Unfortunately, before it could hit the barrier, a black shadow arrow flew out. Just as the shadow arrow was about to hit, Zhang Qing replaced the painful curse with Shadow Curse, reducing the hellhound's powerful magic resistance to normal. Puff. Kacha. The hellhound, who had suffered a heavy blow, once again made an uncomfortable sound, dispelling the negative effects of the fear spell. However, how could Zhang Qing give the hellhound another chance to attack? He immediately followed up with a fear spell, followed by a corrosion spell and a shadow arrow, causing the hellhound to fall to the ground as it continued to run. Chapter 341. Of course. Any apprentice who can defeat a hellhound with his own strength is qualified to become a true warlock. Congratulations, young man, you've qualified. That's right. From now on, you're no longer a lamb, but a butcher with a sharp blade. I hope you can go further and further on the path of embracing darkness until you surpass all of us. For a while, except for Ursula Dellen, the other 3 people present all gave affirmative answers. In any case, they had witnessed the process of a rookie growing into a veteran in half a month, especially the incredible learning speed and the strong psychological endurance. If not for Matthias Shore's recommendation letter, they would have pulled out the boy's head to see what secrets were hidden inside. What about you, my dear teacher? Don't you want to say anything to me? Zhang Qing turned around and asked with a smile. He did not even care about his bleeding arm, his eyes as sharp as daggers. Ursula Dellen smiled, bent down and whispered in his ear in a low voice, "What I want to say is that you are a born warlock, a person who will do anything for power. I look forward to seeing what you will be like in the future. Remember, no matter where you go, no matter what organization you join, you will always be a warlock. This will always be your home. Also, may your backpack be filled with the soul fragments of your enemy." As the last word was spoken, she stuffed the wand made of the bones of a young dragon into Zhang Qing's hand, then stepped forward and disappeared at the end of the trial. The other 3 warlocks quickly followed. In less than a minute, Zhang Qing was the only one left in the empty room. May my backpack be filled with the soul fragments of my enemy? That's really something coming out of your mouth. Zhang Qing shook his head with a smile as he looked at the wand in his hand. The wands in Azeroth were not like the ones in the game that could be used infinitely and were inferior to long-range throwing weapons. On the contrary, they were powerful magic items used to store specific spells and release them when needed. Generally speaking, a wand could store at least 20 to 40 to 60 specific spells. There was no need for incantations or gestures. As long as the magic circuit was activated, it could be released immediately. Once all the stored spells were used up, the wand would be completely destroyed and could not be repaired. However, if the user was able to cast the spells and knew a little about the magic, then he could continuously recharge the wand. In short, the wand was a supplement for spellcasters in battle. Any mage or warlock would prepare 1 or 2 wands in case of an emergency. There was no doubt that the bones of animals and humans were born with strong shadow and death properties, which greatly enhanced the power of these 2 spells. However, considering that warlocks were not psychic acolytes and could not cast psychic spells that were closely related to death, this wand could only store shadow magic. Through the demonic runes that were emitting an evil aura carved on the bones of the baby dragon, Zhang Qing took about 10 minutes to recognize that the spell stored within was none other than the famous Curse of Misfortune. The function of this spell was to plant a seed that connected to a distorted space-time portal in the target's body. Then the seed would slowly absorb the host's vitality and magic power to strengthen itself. When it reached a certain critical point, the terrifying power of space would tear the host apart and use the dead soul to summon a terrifying Doomsday Guard from the distorted spacetime. Moreover, not only would the Doomsday Guard not listen to anyone's orders, it would even attack all living creatures in sight until all living creatures died, or the warlock enslaved or exiled them. However, what made Zhang Qing curious was that if he used this spell in another world or on Earth, would he still be able to summon the Doomsday Guard? Or would there be some other incredible changes? If the summoning was successful, would the Burning Legion discover the world he was in and launch a full-scale invasion? With all kinds of uncertain guesses, he once again took out the demonic book of control and forced the Hellhound to sign his name on it, Gazami. In this way, including the imp Kupnik, Voidwalker Tokak, and Succubus Wren that he had summoned previously, he already had 4 demon followers. In particular, Succubus Wren could not only hide her figure, but she could also transform into beautiful women of different skin colors, temperaments, and races. Just a kiss could capture the other party's heart and make them unknowingly submit to his will. However, after realizing that the demonic book of control had almost perfect control over demons, Zhang Qing was not satisfied with just dominating low-level demons. What he wanted were elite demons like Hellfire and Doomsday Guards that could directly cause great pressure to the enemy. Of course, as a rational person, he would never do such a summoning in Stormwind City. Otherwise, whether it was the Doomsday Guards or Hellfire, they would immediately attract the attention of the Mage Tower. Demons of this level would definitely exceed the bottom line of the Royal Mage Guild. Therefore, even if he wanted to summon them, he had to find a place where no one would go. After leaving the dark basement of the Slaughtered Lamb Inn, Zhang Qing unknowingly came to the small garden in the center of the Mage District. Looking up at the long-lost sunlight, he curled his lips and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Next, should I go and seek refuge with the son of the Black Dragon King, Nefarian, and see the real biological modification technology, or should I go to the Hammer of Misfortune located in Farilas and visit the legendary ancient city of Erethras?" Obviously, he had already abandoned the standard of good and evil defined by ordinary people. As long as he did not attract the attention of the Bronze Dragon, the Guardian of Time, it did not matter even if he had to cooperate with the Dark Titan Sargeras to destroy the world. Just as he was thinking silently, Matthias Shore, who was dressed in a gray robe and dressed like a monk, suddenly sat down beside him and asked in a low voice, "I heard that you have completed the trial of a sorcerer's apprentice?" "Yes, yes. Why, are you in trouble?" A playful expression appeared on Zhang Qing's face. "Phew, yes, big trouble. Have you heard of Nathanos?" The moment he said the name, Matthias Shore could not help but tremble, as if he had recalled something terrible. Chapter 342. That's right. Nathanos Maris is the first and the last human ranger lord. He's also a tactical genius. During the war with the Orcs, he personally participated in the counterattack plan and won victory after victory for the Alliance. Just a few hours ago, Prince Regent Bolvar for Dragon personally ordered me to send someone to the Plaguelands to investigate his whereabouts. Matthias Shaw calmly explained the purpose of his visit. At the same time, he secretly observed Zhang Qing's reaction. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that when he mentioned Nathanos's name, there was a flash of fear and trepidation on his face, as if he was afraid of something. "So you want me to go?" Zhang Qing suppressed the urge to punch the MI7 leader in the face and asked in a low voice. Perhaps others did not know the current situation of Nathanos Maris, but he knew very well that this powerful Ranger General had become the most powerful general under the Dark Queen, the Blightcaller. He was a powerful man who could stand alone in the Scourge army and dominate the Eastern Plaguelands. His ability alone was equivalent to an entire army. Especially in the missions given by the game, all the MI7 agents who participated in the investigation were all killed. No one was spared. As long as he was rational, Zhang Qing would not accept such a risky mission that was almost equivalent to suicide. This was because the Blightcaller was not something that could be dealt with by 1 or 2 people. Unless the Alliance sent an army, he would not go near the Plaguelands. However, Matthias Shaw did not realize this and replied softly, "Yes, I will send you a few experienced veterans to go to the Eastern Plaguelands. If you do well, not only will you receive a generous reward, but you will also be personally received by the king and the duke. How about it, do you want to give it a try?
Sorry, I don't want to try at all. Zhang Qing rejected without hesitation.
Why?
Is it because my offer is not good enough? Matthias Scholl frowned subconsciously. He had never thought that someone would dare to reject his invitation, and he did not understand why the other party would reject such an easy and pleasant task. After all, the undead and the infected animals in the plaguelands might be dangerous to ordinary people, but to powerful mages and warlocks, they were only a small nuisance. As long as they didn't venture into Stratholme, which was guarded by Death Knights, they wouldn't encounter any powerful enemies. Seeing the confusion in the eyes of the MI7 leader, Zhang Qing smiled and explained, "No, it has nothing to do with the conditions. I just don't want to lose my life. Please think about it carefully. When Arthas wielded Frostmourne and slaughtered wantonly, did he spare anyone who was qualified to be called a hero? No. He killed all living beings who dared to resist his rule, and then turned them into his minions and accomplices. Even Sylvanas Windrunner couldn't escape the fate of falling into darkness. Do you think her students can? You mean Nathanos Maris is now a member of the Scourge Army?" Matthias Scholl's mouth couldn't help but twitch. As the eyes and dagger extended from Stormwind City, he knew better than anyone else the disastrous consequences caused by the betrayal of the only human Ranger Lord. He became extremely nervous. It's either the Scourge Army or the Forgotten One. Anyway, I don't think there's any possibility of him being alive. Zhang Qing deliberately hinted with an ambiguous tone. Damn it. Looks like I really have to pay more attention to this matter. Oh right. Since you're not willing to go to the Eastern Plaguelands, then go to the Burning Plains for me and investigate the Blackrock orcs that are wreaking havoc there. I heard a rumor that these annoying fellows are just cannon fodder sent by a hidden force. Here, this is the information sent back by a spy who risked his life. After saying that, Matthias Scholl handed over a few pieces of paper that were written in small letters. Zhang Qing opened it and roughly glanced at it. Then, he nodded his head without batting an eyelid. No problem. I'll set off tomorrow morning and head to the Burning Plains from the Redridge Mountains. Thank you very much. Stormwind City will never forget your contributions. When the mission is over, we'll give you a satisfactory reward. In addition, if you need support or help, you can place this gem at night in a place where the eyes are. Matthias Scholl said those words casually. Then, he placed a glowing pink fluorite on the steps of the garden before turning and disappearing into the crowd. Feeling the warmth from the fluorite, Zhang Qing raised the corner of his mouth and said in a voice that only he could hear, "Going to the Burning Plains? That's great. I don't have to worry about where to go next. Your Highness Nefarian, I hope your biological modification technology won't be too disappointing." There was no doubt that the various dragon-type modification experiments that were going on in the depths of Blackwing's lair had always been one of the things that he had been spying on. Whether it was the two-headed giant dog, Chromagus, that was pieced together by countless giant dragon corpses and could change its resistance at will, or the orb of command that could control dragons, they could all be regarded as revolutionary magical technology. Of course, it was still slightly inferior to the twilight dragons created by Nazario's spouse, Sinestra. But it was enough for him at this stage. As for places like the tomb of the dark titan Sargeras and older, where countless titans' technology was left behind, where great power and knowledge were buried, they were all too dangerous. They were far beyond what he could bear at the moment. After a full night of preparation and rest, Zhang Qing set off for the Redridge Mountain early in the morning the next day, full of anticipation for Blackwing's lair. This time, he did not rent a griffin. Instead, he was placed in the caravan by MI7 and slowly advanced along the main road of Elwyn Forest. In order to not let anyone know the true purpose of his trip, he deliberately chose to go alone. Even his nominal follower, Simon, was left in the inn.
He did not meet with any accidents along the way, and arrived safely at Lakeside Town in a short 4 to 5 days. Zhang Qing did not stay in town for too long. After buying a batch of mountable horses, he continued on his way to the north. In town, he had heard many people mention that the gate that separated the Burning Plains from the Redridge Mountain had long been breached by the Blackrock Orc. These gray-green skinned fellows had already built military strongholds in many places. It seemed that they would be able to launch an all-out attack soon. Chapter 343. How annoying! Have you green-skinned orcs been kicked silly in the head by a donkey? Can't you use your brain a little and identify the target you're robbing? Zhang Qing cursed as he clenched his teeth, pinching his nose to prevent the stench of blood and acid from entering his respiratory tract. The area within a dozen meters of him was littered with incomplete orc corpses. This was the 12th wave of orcs that he had encountered within 2 days of entering the northern part of the Red Ridge Mountains. At the same time, he had broken his record of killing more than 30 orcs in one go. It couldn't be helped. These idiots whose minds were filled with thoughts of war and plundering did not engage in any form of negotiation or communication. The first thing they did when they saw him was to draw their weapons, shout some unknown slogans, and charge forward to kill him. Helpless, Zhang Qing could only resort to violence and kill every orc who dared to draw their weapons at him, taking the opportunity to extract their soul fragments. In just a few days, the soul pouch hanging at his waist was filled with over 100 roaring orc souls of various sizes. It was also thanks to these orcs that he became more proficient in using warlock spells. Now, even without using the power of a sorcerer or summoning demons, he could easily inject curses into the target's body. He could only watch as the orcs fell at his feet with a look of unwillingness and slowly took their last breaths. Of course, as the price of frequent battles, not only did he lose his horse, but his body was also inevitably tainted with some unbearable stench. For example, the stench of blood and the sour smell of orcs who did not bathe for a long time. But despite his complaints, Zhang Qing was still rather satisfied with his gains, especially the soul fragments that filled the pouch. Not only could he use them to cast powerful destruction spells, but he could also use them to lure powerful demons. Just as he was happily planning how to use a part of his soul fragment to summon an apocalypse guard that could truly charge into battle, a black door wrapped in hard iron suddenly appeared not far in front of him. It had been smashed by an unknown force. Without a doubt, this was the legendary door that separated the Burning Plains from the Red Ridge Mountains. Ever since the dark iron dwarves crazily summoned the Balrog, Ragnaros, the Burning Plains had been flooded with large amounts of magma from the depths of the Earth's core, as well as foreign lifeforms from the fire elemental world. In order to prevent these violent elemental lifeforms from threatening the safety of the lakeside town, the Stormwind Kingdom had created a special magic door to defend against possible invasions. But now, the arcane runes engraved on the door had long been completely destroyed by a powerful force, crooked on the side of the road. Less than 200 meters from the door, a nest of imps from time to time were happily bathing and playing in the magma, occasionally letting out ear-piercing screams. Sensing the rolling heat waves in the air, Zhang Qing took a deep breath and sighed softly. The Burning Plains really lives up to its name. I can't believe how the Blackstone Beastmen, Black Iron Dwarves, and Flamebelly Ogres survived in such a vile environment. Just as he finished, he raised his head and drank a bottle of secondary invisibility potion. He completely ignored the imps in the magma and officially stepped into the range of Mount Doom. The sky. The ground scorched black by the hot magma. If there was a place in Azeroth that was closest to the legendary Inferno, it would definitely be the Burning Plains. Because of the terrifying summons of the dark iron dwarves, Ragnaros broke the seal of the Titans in one fell swoop and returned to Azeroth from the fire elemental world. Therefore, the deepest part of the Blackrock volcano's magma was one of the classic team dungeons from the 60s, the Molten Core. Being in the Burning Plains, Zhang Qing could clearly feel that the density of the fire elemental energy was increasing exponentially. There were even places where the fire elemental energy accounted for 70% of the magic energy. This also meant that in such an environment, casting frost magic was simply a fantasy. It was impossible to let all the mages in the team use frost arrows to attack the fire elemental lifeforms like in the game. He even doubted that in such an environment, who could kill the famous Balrog Ragnaros? Not to mention killing him, it would be a miracle to reach the depths of the molten core alive. The temperature in the burning plains alone had reached an astonishing 55 degrees Celsius, and the closer one got to the Black Rock volcano, the higher the temperature. It was estimated that around the Black Rock spire, it would not be surprising if it reached 90 to 100 degrees Celsius. According to the conclusions of the scientists on Earth, the average adult could at most last an hour in an environment of 71 degrees Celsius, less than 50 minutes in an environment of 82 degrees Celsius, and once it exceeded 100 degrees Celsius, they would die within half an hour. This was under the premise of not doing any strenuous exercise. It was common knowledge that the more a person fought, the more heat their body needed to emit. Zhang Qing could not imagine what kind of person in the so-called correct history could defeat Ragnaros in such a terrifying environment. Could it be that they were a group of people who did not need to breathe, rest, heartbeat, or even normal life forms, the forgotten ones? Walking slowly along the endless black, scorched earth, Zhang Qing carefully avoided the large scorpions, the reddish-brown furred wolves, and the fire and lava elementals that occasionally appeared near the magma. In less than 4 hours, his entire body was soaked in sweat, and there was only 3 days' worth of drinking water left in his magic pouch. If he could not find a place to replenish his drinking water within 3 days, he could only start using large amounts of mana to artificially create fresh water. What was more terrifying was that in the burning plains where the terrain was destroyed, he could not determine his direction at all, whether it was the compass that was affected by the chaotic magnetic field, or the sky that was covered by gray smoke. The only thing that could barely serve as a marker was the towering volcano in front of him, the Black Rock volcano. Helplessly, he could only use the Orb of Deceit to transform himself into a Blackrock Orc warlock and walk towards the Blackrock volcano. At least with this appearance, he would not be directly attacked by the orcs and black dragons along the way. As for the rest, he would take it one step at a time. Zhang Qing believed that as long as he could stand in front of the Black Dragon King, Nefarian, he would definitely be able to gain his trust, and even personally participate in the process of creating colorful dragons and draconic beasts. On the path of transcendence, there was no such thing as good or evil, only endless power and knowledge. Chapter 344. Following the path of the scarlet lava, Zhang Qing continued to move forward, one step at a time. The continuous high temperature had already made his brain a little fuzzy, and he could not remember how many days it had been since he entered the burning plains. Furthermore, even if he used frost spells to lower his body's temperature, it still could not relieve his physical and mental fatigue. As a resident of a modern city with well-developed public transportation, this was the first time he had experienced how difficult and painful it was to travel. Luckily, disguising himself as an orc warlock had saved him a lot of unnecessary trouble. Even though he would occasionally be attacked by fire and lava elementals, the Blackstone orcs stationed in the simple fortress, as well as the black dragon whelps and draconians wandering around the hilly area, would no longer take the initiative to attack. Occasionally, there would even be an orc who would take the initiative to greet him. However, he did not understand the orc language at all, and did not dare to have too much contact with them. He could only pretend to be cold and aloof as he nodded and left without saying a word. There was no doubt that this method prevented his identity from being exposed to a certain extent, and at the same time cut off the shortcut to the upper levels of the Blackstone Pagoda. Just as Zhang Qing was starting to doubt whether he could reach the Blackstone Pagoda with his little remaining stamina, a large black shadow suddenly swept past his head, followed by a violent gale. Before his slow brain could react to what was happening, a young black dragon with a wingspan of over 6 meters descended from the sky, blocking the only path forward. Lowly human. Master wants to see you. Master? Zhang Qing instantly realized that his identity had been exposed, and a hint of nervousness flashed across his eyes. That's right. Don't try to resist or escape. I guarantee that you will be killed by me and my brothers and sisters before your laughable spells can take effect. After saying that, the young dragon opened its mouth and let out a loud roar. In the blink of an eye, another dozen or so black dragons between 5 and 7 meters long flew over from all directions. They kept circling in the air, and a few of them even spat out a dragon's breath that was a mixture of shadow and fire damage. Evidently, these young dragons were no longer pure black dragons. They were a special breed that had been modified by the son of the Black Dragon King, Nefarian. This dual-attribute dragon breath had a resounding name, Shadow Flames, according to a rumor that came from an unknown place. Only armor made from the scales of an adult black dragon could withstand the invasion of the Shadow Flames. Otherwise, if an ordinary person was exposed to the Shadow Flames, they would be devoured on the spot, and not even their bones would be left. Zhang Qing didn't want to test the might of the Shadow Flames at all, so he wisely chose not to resist. Instead, he took the initiative to revert back to his original appearance. Then what are you waiting for? Lead the way. I can't wait to meet His Highness Nefarian and his ongoing experiment. Stand there and don't move. I'll take you to see my master. The black dragon shook its head in disdain and placed its right claw on Zhang Qing's shoulder. Then, it loudly chanted an ancient draconic magic. Very quickly, the energy in the air became restless and finally gathered into an energy that could tear space apart. The man and dragon disappeared without a trace in less than 3 minutes. When the intense pressure and dizziness disappeared, Zhang Qing slowly opened his eyes and found himself at the highest level of the Blackstone Tower. Through the stone railings not far away, he could even see the Blackstone volcano that was constantly spewing lava below. On the spacious platform, a man wearing black armor and a bright flame crown sat on the throne at the highest point. His eyes flickered with a frightening golden light. Without a doubt, he was none other than the eldest son of the Deathwing Nazario, the current leader of the Black Dragon Army, the elder brother of the Black Dragon Princess Onyxia, the famous Nefarian. Even though Zhang Qing had already seen a real dragon in the Song of Ice and Fire, he still felt a trace of instinctive fear and trembling in the face of the dragon's aura that Nefarian emitted. Not to mention him, even the young black dragon that was teleported over crawled on the ground and lowered its head to express its humility to its master. Interesting human, can you tell me what drove you to come to the burning plains where danger lurks everywhere? What is it that allowed you to persevere in such a harsh environment? Honor? Wealth? Or power? After a long silence, Nefarian was the first to break the silence and asked with a slightly playful tone. As the owner of the Blackstone Tower, no matter whether it was the burning plains or the scorching canyon, every movement couldn't escape his eyes. In fact, from the moment Zhang Qing passed through the door, he had been hiding in the dark and observing silently, trying to figure out the purpose of the other party's visit. One had to know that the burning plains wasn't a place where ordinary people would come. Be it the Alliance or the Horde, they could barely maintain an outpost that was used to spy on intelligence. Therefore, generally speaking, everyone who came to the burning plains would carry some important mission or mission. But after a period of observation, Nefarian discovered that Zhang Qing didn't go to the Morgan outpost at all. Instead, he went straight to the Blackstone volcano. This unusual action undoubtedly aroused his interest, which led to today's scene. No, Your Highness, the driving force that supports me is neither honor, nor wealth, nor power. It is knowledge. If you don't mind, please give me a live subject and I will show you some interesting research results. Then you will understand the purpose of my visit." Zhang Qing bowed respectfully and made his request at the same time. He knew that if he couldn't prove his worth in the first place, then what awaited him next would be death or torture that was even more terrifying than death. "Oh, Rend, bring a prisoner here." Nefarian ordered a glowing orb beside his seat. After a short while, a human with bloody wounds all over his body was escorted to the hall. Some of the wounds had already festered and were oozing pus. If it wasn't for the fact that Azeroth's human body was much stronger than Earth's, he would have died long ago. However, he wasn't much better now. Not only did he lose the strength to resist, but his eyes were also very unfocused. If he didn't receive treatment in time, he would die in 2 to 3 days. The indifferent Zhang Qing didn't seem to care about the miserable state of the prisoner. In front of the Black Dragon Prince, he poured a small bottle of red jelly-like mucus into the prisoner's mouth. In an instant. Chapter 345. Ah! After the man who had completely lost his mind killed the 2 orc warriors from the Blackrock clan, he glared with bloodshot eyes and pounced towards Nefarian's throne. He did not seem to be affected by the dragon's aura that was unintentionally emitted by the other party. He raised his sandbag-sized fist and smashed it down. Unfortunately, before he could even touch his target, the Black Dragon Prince raised his hand and waved it lightly as if he was chasing away a fly. In an instant, the mutated human seemed to have crashed into an invisible force field. His entire body was sent flying more than 10 meters away. He only stopped when he crashed into a thick stone pillar. Dazzling blood spurted out of his mouth, and he fell to the ground on the verge of death. The violent impact crushed his internal organs, and dark blood slowly flowed out of his mouth and nose. Just as the captive was struggling to get up and launch a second attack, the Black Dragon Prince suddenly disappeared from the throne. The next second he instantly appeared in front of the other party and lifted the mutated man up with one hand. He carefully observed the worm-like blood vessels under the skin. After a while, he turned around and asked, "What did you give him to drink?" "Nothing much. A special substance that is rich in energy radiation, extracted from the ring-shaped mountain water crystal." Zhang Qing replied concisely. "Ring-shaped mountain water crystal? What's that?" Nefarian continued to ask with interest. As a madman who had personally created the colorful dragon clan, he could tell at a glance that this mutated human who was in great pain had actually evolved under the influence of some unknown force. Although the side effect of the evolution process was severe damage to the brain, if he could use this technology on the colorful dragons he had created, he would quickly obtain an invincible and terrifying army. Sensing the prying tone of the Black Dragon Prince, Zhang Qing immediately lowered his voice and explained, "There are large amounts of multicolored special crystals buried around the Ungoro crater. According to my research, these crystals are constantly emitting different types of energy radiation. Under the influence of the radiation, the creatures there are more ancient than the outside world, and their bodies are also larger. Especially the powerful magic Tyrannosaurus. It's simply a miracle of biological evolution." It was obvious that he had purposely hidden the fact that the Ungoro crater was actually a biological experiment site for the Titans. The reason was simple. Once they knew that the crystals in the crater were related to the Titans, they would have a clear direction, and Nefarian would lose his value. Chess pieces that had lost their value usually did not live for long. "That sounds interesting. Tell me, mortal, how far have you progressed in your research?" Nefarian stroked the beard on his chin, not hiding his greed. Zhang Qing pretended to sigh helplessly. "My apologies, I'm afraid that I'll have to disappoint you. Because I don't have enough test subjects, I can't adjust the dosage bit by bit, so many times, I can't even guarantee the survival of the test subjects." "I understand. You're the Dragon Prince, Nefarian, 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 Nefarian thought Nefarian, Nefarian. But today, a human that was insignificant in his eyes was actually standing in front of him and speaking so confidently without any fear or reverence. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became oppressive. All the servants who had some understanding of their master's personality realized that this temperamental black dragon prince was angry. They all prostrated themselves on the ground, afraid that they would accidentally become the target of his venting. On the contrary, it was Zhang Qing who unhurriedly bowed and softly complimented, "Yes, Your Highness. In my mind, apart from you, there is no other person in Azeroth who has the qualifications to conduct this research. Only you can decipher the mysteries behind it. I am willing to do everything in my power to help you complete it and create the miracle of life." You want to be my servant? Nefarian raised his eyebrows in surprise. He did not expect that the young human in front of him would be willing to hand over his research results so easily. "No, not a servant. I wish to be your collaborator. I do not ask for wealth, power, or authority. I only wish to unravel some of the secrets hidden behind the world." Zhang Cheng corrected him with a serious expression. He would not become anyone's servant, even if it was only in name. Furthermore, the black dragons were cruel and cunning. They did not treat their subordinates as anything. Becoming their servant was no different from committing suicide. Ha 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 ha. Collaborator? What makes you think that you have the qualifications to work with me? Do you know who I am? Nefarian laughed maniacally as he questioned loudly. Of course. You are the eldest son of Deathwing, the successor of the Black Dragon Army, the Great Nefarian. I also know that you are conducting research on the rainbow dragons, trying to create a new species that combines the abilities of the 5 dragon aspects. Think about it, if you were to add in this evolutionary radiation, how powerful would it be? Whether it is the Alliance or the Horde, they would all submit to your army. You would become the true king of the world. Under the influence of Zhang Cheng's passionate voice, the Black Dragon Prince revealed an expression of extreme enjoyment. It was as if he could already see his army sweeping through Azeroth and finally establishing a huge empire. The arrogance in the dragon's subconscious made him forget how a mere mortal knew of his identity, and how did he know about the secret research on the rainbow dragons. After a full 2 to 3 minutes, he finally snapped out of his fantasy and nodded with satisfaction. You have a way with words, mortal. All right, I will benevolently allow you to become an ally of the Black Dragon Army. But remember, if one day I find out that your research is of no use to the army, you can execute me at any time. Zhang Qing took the initiative to add the second half of the sentence. This was because the crystals produced by the crater were the advanced biological technology left behind by the Titans. He believed that if these crystals could create an incredible creature like the magic Tyrannosaurus, they would naturally be useful to the dragons. As for whether the Black Dragon Prince could use these crystals that emitted radiation to create rainbow dragons that were even more powerful than the ones in the storyline, that was none of his business. After all, once he got what he wanted, he would immediately leave Azeroth and prepare for the upcoming trial. It did not matter even if he attracted the attention of the Bronze Dragon. Very good. From now on, you will be my chief consultant. You will be responsible for hatching the rainbow dragons. At most 1 month, I want to see your result. Otherwise, you know the consequences.